When I started to enjoy whiskey, when I first got into whiskey in 2005, there were virtually no single-digit age statement whiskies, none. I've sat here most of the day trying to think of one single-digit age statement I could have bought back then, and I can't think of one. There was even very little non-age statement as well. That wasn't so long ago. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing very well. Welcome to the vPub. Welcome to another Thursday night. I'm a wee bit hoarse. There's nothing going on. I don't have any issues as far as I'm aware. But I have to admit an elderly weakness to you. After my travels to the States last week, I've come back. And for the first time in my life, I think I'm actively suffering from some jet lag. Each day, I don't know which way is up and down. And I've just hit these kind of walls of fatigue and things. So I think I'm just a wee bit hoarse, maybe from the weekend, from all the chatting and stuff. But as long as you can hear me okay, that's fine, right? Hope you're all doing very well. Welcome to everyone. Let's pull up this chat. I don't know what's happened to my chat window. It's frozen. Sometimes it happens. I'll pop it out to see if that helps a wee bit. We're moving now. We're good. We're all good. Wonderful to see you all again. I wonder how many of you were able to join in last week when I was over in Texas. It was a bit frantic. It was a different vPub. These vPubs, when you're on location, you've kind of got to roll with things and just deal with all the troubles and difficulties that get thrown up. And it happens quite regularly. I've forgot to put my machine on Do Not Disturb, and I'm getting text messages pinging in. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well. I loved my time traveling over to Texas. And for me, yeah, it's fantastic to see this new geography and this big expanse of land and this bigger expanse of land and bigger expanse of land. The place is absolutely massive. Everything's bigger. Generally, it really is true what they say about Texas. But for me, it's not even about the whiskey. It's not even about trying the new whiskies and things. And it's not even about that cool privilege I had to spend time in the Iron Root Distillery. It's always about people and meeting whiskey people. Whiskey people are the best. And it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter which walk of life you are. It doesn't matter what God you pray to, what food you eat. It matters not. They're really, really cool people. And it was fantastic to meet so many of you that I see and hear, so many of you that I keep in touch with. But only now and again, we're able to raise a glass together. So for that alone, it was an absolute tonic. Just off. Lee J. Brown is celebrating being a member for 30 months. Thank you, Lee J. Enjoyed last week's live, Roy. Cheers. Thanks very much, buddy. Thanks to you. The audio was terrible. Like I said, you've just got to roll with these things sometimes. And I realized that we were probably if we were going to have a problem in that big, huge, open, echoey space, it really didn't matter how close we got that mic to us. It was just going to be very echoey. So we tried it in all the settings and things, and I tested it, and that was about the best we could get it. So we just went with it, and it seemed to be fine. Anyway, before I go on, please don't worry. Tonight's not going to be a negative session. It's not going to be all about railing against non-age statement or railing against single-digit age statements. It's not railing against anything, because actually I believe that the whole takeaway from tonight, I hope if I've done my job well, is going to be a positive message, a good thing, generally speaking. But we're still going to put a couple of whiskies through their paces. We're still going to talk about concepts in general, and we're going to help you kind of consider how best to proceed when you're faced with purchase options. Non-aged, I've got a fruit fly in the room as well. I need to do my Mr. Miyagi. When you're faced with those options, what do you go for? Do you go with the tried and tested? Do you go with a non-age statement? Do you go with a young whiskey? Or do you go with something a bit older and spend a bit extra money? That's what the vPub's all about, and it's becoming more and more like that. But rather than just have me standing and banging on about, oh, whiskey is becoming difficult to afford, let's look at what we can buy. Let's look at what is available to afford, and let's consider its value proposition. Value. It doesn't need to be all about price. Jimmy Jazz is here. You star. Good to see you, Jimmy. Good evening. Welcome home. Where bottles like Jason's 8-year-old Aberlour from the 70s, a rare thing. Jason's 8-year-old Aberlour from the 70s. Okay, so you're way ahead of me here. It's kind of a myth that single-digit age statements is a new thing, but we're going to get onto that. I've even got an example or two here, Jimmy. But Jason's 8-year-old Aberlour is a great example. Andrew Butler is saying one of my first single malts was a Glenfiddich with an 8-year age statement, and I believe Glenmurray lost theirs not long before my tour there, so they used to exist. Absolutely, they did. I know for a fact that Glenmurray existed with age statements. It still does. They still have their heritage range, which is age stated. The classic range is non-age statement. But absolutely, there's lots of single-digit age statement whiskies in the past. Everyone to see you. Good to see you, Chris. I hope you're very well. Good to see you, my friend. Good to welcome you here. Tom Elmer, you star. Good to see you, Tom. Tom travelled from Alaska, which is pretty much almost as far as I travelled to get to the Bastards Ball in Texas last week. It was an absolute pleasure to see him standing there in La Quinta when we walked along the corridor. Hello, Roy. Good to see you back where you belong. Thank you, buddy. I hope you're home safe and comfortable as well. Whiskey Stream 5. Harrow, good to see you. Good evening, Roy, and all the other whiskey folk. Harrow, it's wonderful to welcome you in, my friend. And Carlos San Diego saying, welcome home, Roy. Hope you enjoyed your time in Texas. I very much did, Carlos. Good to have you, buddy. Gordon Fraser is saying, evening all. And Ethan Sterner. Ethan, good to have you. The audio got better as the vPub went on. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe we just worked out how to scooch a wee bit closer to the mic or to point our voices to the mic. I don't know, but I'm glad. Don McCausland saying, evening, Aquavite Barflies and Barflies. Long time no see. Don McCausland, good to see you, Don. Nice to have you, buddy. And Mark Slinger is here. Mark, you star. I'm enjoying my chair very, very much. Roy, the audio wasn't that bad for me. I think some people are more sensitive to it than others. I am quite sensitive to it. I think it's okay if you don't see people, if they're a bit fuzzy. But if you can hear them clearly, I think that's better. I think you could hear most of us. Hopefully you get through it. Hopefully you endured for us. Joe Prestera saying, hope you're well after your trip. I wonder how a single digit over 46% Lefroy would be. That's in itself very interesting, Joe, isn't it? And Corinne Egloff. Corinne, thank you for your recent support as well. Nice to welcome you into the vPub. Hello, Roy. So glad I joined. Greetings from Switzerland. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. I hope everybody's met Corinne so far. Lunarin is here saying, good evening, Barflies, and hello, you wonderful Roy. Hey, Luna, I'm missing you. We need to figure out a way to hook up, right? Maybe it would have to be Germany, maybe later this year, or maybe early next year. It would be fantastic to see you again, Luna. Fantastic. Hope you're doing well. Arnie Tiger is saying a current and interesting topic. Hopefully, Arnie, and it's good to welcome you into the vPub once more. And Noralex is saying, evening, Roy. Evening, Noralex. I hope you are also doing better than me. I can feel my voice is not uncomfortable. It's not sore for me, but I can tell I'm a wee bit hoarse. Whiskey helps, don't you think? Cheers, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the vPub. In my glass, I have a single-digit age statement whiskey. Of course I do. I'm going to see if we've still got the quote from the beginning. I should have copied and pasted it, but before, when I was setting up and things and I pulled up the YouTube window here, the chat was already starting about 45 minutes before we went live. And Bevoburn was talking about how he was trying to pick out a single-digit age statement for tonight's vPub. And he said it was pretty difficult to find it. Now, I don't know if he struggled to find it by going to his local liquor store or spirit specialist, depending on where he lives, or whether he just found it difficult to draw from his own collection. But he mentioned that single-digit age statements were not common for him. When I was in Texas, I would say kind of similar. They're still in a minority. There's plenty non-age statement and there's plenty age stated. But single-digit age statements, there were a few. It was in my mind and it was thinking about it because obviously I'm thinking about this vPub and what whiskies I'm going to present. There weren't many, but they were there. I opened tonight by talking about when I started to enjoy whiskey. I mean, of course, I'm just going to supermarkets, maybe duty free, very occasionally going to a spirit specialist, but I wasn't really comfortable there. I found it all a wee bit intimidating because I didn't know too much, and I tended to just go with recommendations or kind of go to safe territory that I recognized. I'm sure we're all a wee bit like that when we start off our journey. Most of us are. I cannot think in 2005 of a single digit age statement whiskey. I'm sure there must be at least one or two, but I can't think about it now. The whiskies I was buying back then, Balvenie 12, Lagavulin 16, these were available in a supermarket, as was Macallan 12. Ardbeg 10, I mean, even back then, the Ardbeg 10, I think it was just coming out about that time, maybe just a little bit later. Lafroig certainly had their 10-year-old out there. Glenmorangie 10, Glenfiddich 12, Glenlivet 12. It seemed like everything had an age statement. And not only did they have an age statement in 2005 or thereabouts, but it was fairly substantial. 10-year-old, double digits was the minimum. And that was whiskey for me. I didn't question it. I didn't think about it too much. I just accepted that that was the case. Then what happened? Move on a few years, move into the 2010s, things start to wobble quite quickly. Scotch whisky, single malt Scotch whisky is starting to really take hold. The boom is on top of boom is on top of boom, and we don't know where it's going to slow down. And the stocks start to struggle. And inevitably, what we start to see is a lot more non-age statement, non-age stated whiskies. And that's, generally speaking, broad brush here, that was in direct response to the fact that the stocks were struggling, because we're not just talking about available stock. We're talking about having available stock, but also having enough stock to keep and lay down for future vattings, future higher age stated releases, or whatever it may be. It's a constant battle of cask management. So they realized that stock was becoming an issue, and we saw non-age statements. We saw a lot of them, and the community, us as drinkers, started to pick up on this. And we started to rail against it. But it wasn't just the fact that the age statement was removed. It was to do with the fact the price was staying up at the same. And we noticed a step change in quality oftentimes. We could taste that the spirit was different. And often we could taste that it was younger, and we didn't like it. So we complained and we asked questions, and they told us and they explained to us when we had the ability to sit in front of a brand representative or somebody from the producers. They could tell us, look, yes, it's a younger whiskey. We can't keep the 12-year-old age statement or whatever it is because we just don't have the stock. So it'll take us a while to catch up. And we said, well, put a different age statement on it. Tell us. Give us transparency. And they explained the nature of what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep the profile as close as they can to what's expected, but they're using all sorts of casks in order to do that. So they're trying to bring us the best experience they can for the price point, and that means sometimes dipping into younger casks. And okay, we can talk about non-age statements as long as we want. It's changed now, because with the growth of interest in premium malt whiskies, we're now seeing non-age statements that are not that. We're seeing non-age statements that are vatted together to be different, to be creative, that are using fairly young stock to bring youth and vibrancy and whatever, maybe just a backbone, canvas, foundation, whatever you want to call it, and bringing in much older stock as well to bring a layered, complex product. And if they were to put an age statement on that, it would end up being single digit, and it would potentially betray what's actually in the bottle. And it would certainly be a difficult selling point to have that single digit age statement when they're asking quite an expensive sum or quite a lot of money for something that is potentially using a lot of older stock. None of that is going to be what tonight's about. Tonight's going to be about something that's happened on top of that. And it's a cyclical thing. It's history repeating. Because if we go back to the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the kind of boom, the growth of being able to buy a single malt whiskey, single digit age statements, as already pointed out by Jimmy Jazz, was a thing. What we're seeing today and the reaction to single digit age statements is a reflection of the last 30 to 40 years of the Scotch malt whiskey journey. Not for us, but as an industry. That's what I want to focus on tonight. Multi-mission men was saying, I think Benromac 5 and Glendronach, the Heel and 8-year-old, were some of the earlier single-digit age statements. That's right. I remember the Benromac 5. I didn't buy the Benromac 5. I did try it. Thought it was fine. Again, the Heelan, the Glendronach 8-year-old Heelan, I thought was a decent product. Came out about 2015. Since been discontinued. It's still available there. It's still on the shelf here and there, but it's not on the Glendronach website anymore, which is a wee bit of a shame, and I think that's to do with Glendronach positioning. I'm not sure. But I felt the Heelan was a good young product. Jesse Artinsalo is here saying, good evening, Barflies. Good evening to you, Jesse. And Mike is saying, I almost picked up molasses, Mike. I almost picked up a McQueen's 3-year-old blended Scotch, $13 US at my local Total Wine, but I'm pretty sure it would not have lived up to the price. I would have been tempted for $13, Mike. Worst case, you can mix it away, right, with some mixers, some lemonade. Ian Bruce. Ian is, no, I don't think it's a new name. I think I've welcomed you before. I hope I have, Ian. A nice single-digit age-stated whiskey usually comes from indie bottlers. The W and 8-year-old, 2012 by SCN. Single Cask Nation, would that be? Yes, we're going to touch on that tonight. We're absolutely going to touch on that tonight. Here's how I'm going to structure tonight. So it's just kind of, there's a bit more interaction than normal with you. I'm going to talk about what I believe single-digit age statements offer. I'm going to talk about when it's a bit cynical. And I'm going to talk about why we should actually be hopefully embracing the whole idea of single-digit age statements, because we have to always consider the alternative, right? So what I'm going to do is I've got 2 whiskies here. I've got one on the go just now, and I'm going to sip one more. One is from an indie and one's an official bottling. And after I've finished these 2 drams, you're going to decide what I'm going to open, because I've been collecting recently, and I've been collecting whiskies based on single-digit age statements for topics such as this and future topics, maybe follow-ups to this. But also I've been collecting whiskies based on the theme of the vPub a couple of weeks ago, that kind of crisis collection, that idea that we're going to focus on, right, okay, we're going to need to watch our expenditure a little bit here. We don't know what this winter's going to bring next year. Things are all a bit odd, and they don't feel as safe and secure as they did a few years ago. So, we don't want to give up our luxury items, but we're going to have to cut our cloth a bit neater, I think. So keeping on that theme, I've been buying whiskies with an exception. I did splash out while I was in Texas on one bottle. I've been buying whiskies on that theme, but I'm going to drop them all in on a Google form. I'm going to drop the link in here, and hopefully you guys can go off only if you're watching live. If you're picking this up on the replay, thank you for picking up on the replay. I really appreciate it. But this is something that's for the live participation, the folks that's in now. And I'll drop it in a couple of times and hope that you can just go in and drop a quick vote. And what that's going to do is it's going to do 2 things. It's going to help me decide what I'm going to pour. So if I've got 5 glasses out tonight, so that I can make sure that I enjoy 5 drams with you, 5 only. I've held up 6, but I did this one twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drams. This is my way of showing you Thursday night responsible drinking, just in case I'm required to be doing any school run tomorrow as well, of course. But what I'm going to do is have these 2 whiskies, the indie and the official, and then the next 3 will be uncorkings, things that I've been saving up, but you can decide what they are. Let's drop in the link in order for you to vote. Because the second thing that we're going to achieve tonight is we're going to get a bit of practice for the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. That's not open yet. In the coming weeks, you're going to be hopefully all participating in the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. And that means that you'll be able to use this very same function, Google Forms, in order to cast your vote for the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. Okay, I'm dropping in the link now. Hopefully that's worked. And it means that you can go along, just click it. You're not required to log in with an email or anything for this. It's just fast, quick in and out. You can leave a name optionally if you want. But you're listed there are going to be the 9 whiskies I've got off to the side. And the only thing that ties all these 9 whiskies in common are that they are sealed and they all have single-digit age statements. There's official bottlings here. There are independent bottlings here. There are Scotch whiskies here. There are single malts here. There are blends here, and there are world whiskies here too. The only thing that unites them is the fact that they need to be opened and that they're all single-digit ages. I'm only going to open 3 tonight, just because. But the 3 that I'm going to open, rather than me picking what my favourites would be, I can share with you the 3 that I want to pick. That'll be decided by you. You can vote for 2 in that form. You can vote for 2, but I will open 3 tonight. So whatever bobs to the top. Let's see if that's actually working. If I nip in here. Oh my goodness, it's working a treat. Aye. And we've got a bit of a winner already. Wow, that's really quite amazing how quick that's working. We're well over 60 votes in already. So what I'll do is I'll drop it in once more, and I'll drop it in a couple of times just to make sure that everybody can see what we're doing here. Just a form, you just click in, it's a quick checkbox. Tick, tick, and then out again. You can leave a name if you want to. I'm not going to probably follow up. And after the live stream's finished tonight, this will be cut completely. In fact, when I decide to go in and start uncorking them, I'll shut it down so there's no more. Ethan has noticed the little goodbye message. Thanks for helping Roy drink. Absolutely. Is Aquavite freezing? Am I a bit choppy tonight? I hope not. I did a test before we went, and it should be all rock solid. It is working, says Bruno Martins, and Jeff Whiskey said I had to go for the Christmas cake one. Always the season. Yeah, that was a recent review by Gilbert on Dramface recently, and because it was at 48% ABV, I think it was, and a very reasonable price, I decided on the back of Gilbert's review on Dramface to go for it. So it's going to be an interesting one, but it's sitting there. Gerben Blocker is saying it worked fine, fantastic. And David Evans is saying, as well as Bell's 5-year-old, I have a Lawson 8-year-old, 2 age-stated, single age-stated blends. David, absolutely. Chris SBWE is celebrating. Chris, you're celebrating being a member for 21 months. I must known you as a different Chris before. Better late than never. There's no such thing as late to the pub. Don't worry about it, Chris. And Max Kreitner is saying, all good here. Smooth video. Fantastic, Max. And Peter is saying, must be your jet lag. Ryan Sutherland is saying, definitely 2 stood out for me, but Gold Spot is a must. So Ryan's telling everybody one of the options on the list there is Gold Spot. You might have already picked out that that's the exception to this. It might be good value, but it's a big ask. They're charging over £100, 110, £120, more than that now in a lot of places if you want to pick it up in the UK. I managed to get mine in the States for $100. So I buckled and I said, okay, I'll take it. Because I do want to try it. I'm a big fan of the Spot series. I'm a big fan of single pot still Irish whiskey. And the Gold Spot, is this them pushing it just a bit too far? All the spots have had a history, you know, the green spot, the yellow spot, red spot. These were genuine splodges of paint to mark and denote a profile of whiskey back in the days of Irish single pot still being sold through a grocer. Gold spot did not ever exist. There was never gold paint. So what that tells us quite a lot of things there. It tells us that they see a market out there for premiumized version of their core range. We saw that with the 7-year-old Blue Spot was pretty expensive for a 7-year-old. People bought it in droves, sold out quickly. I didn't get a bottle of it. We can see with their Yellow Spot 12-year-old, it's probably one of the most expensive 12 years old in the UK that you can buy right now. And the 15-year-old, the one that used a wee bit of Marsala, if my memory serves me right, was also super expensive too. Irish whiskey is pricing itself dangerously close to the edge of, I think, what will be tolerated, but it knows no limits when it comes to growth, and we're seeing the same in premiumizing Scotch whiskey too. So if we end up picking the Gold Spot tonight, it will be put to the test. It's not a review. It's an uncorking. It's a very different thing. Anybody that's known whiskey for long enough will know that if you're going to review a whiskey based on the first couple of pours, the neck pour, if you like, you know that it's not being fair to yourself, to the whiskey, and certainly not to the community. So it has to be contextualized. It's a neck pour and it's a first reaction only. Watchman999 saying happy to help you drink. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, sir. And Neil Gupta is saying, all good. And Gino is celebrating being a member for 30 months. Had the famous Jimmy Legg in my whiskey room today. Jimmy Legg has made it back to the pub, though, and he is in here tonight. Good to see you, Gino. And it's good to see Jimmy. Thanks very much for hosting him. And I'm sure he behaved himself as well. Listen, Gino is celebrating being a barfly. Gino and all the other barflies that you see with the little barfly symbol next to their name, they are keeping the content on Aquavitae channel ad-free. The last recycled review, because of the amount of barflies I've got supporting, also went out ad-free as well. I'm hopefully going to get to the point that I don't need to rely on Google partnerships and ads and things for all of my content. You don't need to sit through ads. I can't control the ads. I don't know what they are. It's a pain in the ass to sit through, especially if you kind of dip out and come back in again, having to sit through an ad before you start watching the content. I just want to ditch if I can, and the barflies are making that possible. How I fund the channel is different. That's through Patreon. So it's through my Patreon support. That means all of the whiskey that I ever talk about, I've bought with my own money. Patreon means that I can exist, and I can exist fully independently too. A lot of people ask that, what's the difference between a barfly? What's the difference between Patreon support? They're different. Thank you all so much for all of your support. Cheers. The whiskey I'm drinking now was a wee bit controversial when it first came out, originally launched as a special edition to celebrate Lagavulin 200th anniversary in 2016. We were gifted this new whiskey. The original anniversary one had a slightly different label here, but generally speaking, it looked exactly like this. A lot of people were a bit surprised because depending on the market, the price was the same as the 16 or even a wee bit higher. But I loved it. I loved it from the get-go. I loved it from the beginning because it brought a completely different take on Lagavulin. Number one, it was exclusively ex-bourbon. It was a much purer, cleaner, sweeter, easier to access, in my opinion, much more complex things in Lagavulin that you don't normally get in a 16-year-old. I love this whiskey and I love spending time with it. Some people thought that the original anniversary edition was better than this. I did a comparison. I think I did it live on a vPub years ago and decided that, yeah, there's a difference, but preference over one or the other is purely a subjective thing. I was very happy to have this. But the main reason I was happy to pay a bit more is that this is natural. It does carry Mit Forbstoff stickers on the box, but that's a coverall, I think. I think that's to do with distribution and supply chain. It doesn't say that anywhere on the bottle, and it does not say that on the boxes that we get here. I think this is natural. It is so, so pale that you can see if they're putting colour in this. I mean, why bother? I don't think it's been coloured at all. I also think at the higher ABV of 48%, there's no need to chill filter it either. So what we have here potentially is a much more natural Lagavulin. It would be nice if Diageo told us that's the case, but anyhow. Since Lagavulin 16 is now gone, it's gone. I am not paying £80 for 16-year-old Lagavulin. If they bring it to me natural, I'll consider it. Honestly speaking, a 16-year-old single malt Islay whiskey, unchill filtered, natural colour, diluted much less, that's a different prospect. But Lagavulin 16 is diluted, it is stripped, and it is coloured. And they're charging premium prices for it. So as much as I loved my time with the whiskey that changed me from being just a pedestrian whiskey drinker fancier into a whiskey geek, that's what Lagavulin 16 did in 2009 to me. I'm happy to say goodbye to it. There's too much choice these days, especially in that price point where Lagavulin 16 is. This is still available for, depending on where you are, around about the £50 mark. It's still a bit pricier than its competitor along the Kildalton coast, Ardbeg 10, but you know, they trade punches on price depending on where the market is. I still think this is a very nice, delicious, slightly sweet, icing sugar sweet, complex and enjoyable Islay whiskey. This has not left my shelf yet. Interestingly, much of the chatter when this came out was about that single-digit age statement. It was jarring to people, right? It was half the age of the official bottling until people tasted it. And they quickly got over the 8-year age statement. And I think that has to be a theme. Surely the age statement on the bottle is a declaration of transparency and honesty. There's going to have to be context that we need to weave into the whiskey to understand what else is in the bottle, of course. But surely knowing that it's eight years old is just a measure of transparency. And when we buy the bottle without trying it, a lot of us don't have the ability to try before we buy. I understand that. When we buy it, we know that we're buying a younger whiskey. But as time's going on, we are learning that younger whiskey today, as I speak to you in 2022, is not younger whiskey of 10 or 15 years ago. Certainly not younger whiskey of 20 years ago. This is kind of what I want to focus on tonight. Welsh Toro is in. So good to see you, Welsh. I hear you, but we're having to let go so many drams, which are piss poor value. We're rolling with it. I know we are. We're just trying to find a way to roll with it here, Welsh, because so many whiskies are being taken away from us. Diageo have just done a trifecta, haven't they? Lagavulin, Oban, and Talisker with their 18-year-old, the Talisker 18-year-old. C'est la vie. If it happened 15 or so years ago, we'd have been really disappointed. But it's happening in 2022. Behind Talisker, we've got Ardnamurchan. Behind Lagavulin, we've got umpteen other Islay whiskies, including its sibling Caol Ila, waiting behind it to give us a very, very similar value prospect. Although Caol Ila is jumping up in price now as well. But there are lots of reasonably priced Islay whiskies, a lot more naturally presented as well. Oban, I'll admit, is a different prospect, but it's Western Highland in style. So there are alternatives. The whiskies that are being taken away from us, it's not really the kind of enthusiast-facing whiskies that's happening with a lot of the time. I think that we live in a time that we have to focus on the fact that we have never known as much whiskey as we do today. We've never known. I'm talking about whiskey on the shelf, whiskey being released, new distilleries being opened. I'm talking about warehouses bulging with whiskey like never, ever, ever before. Businesses are chasing money right now, sometimes with cynicism, and we're suffering from that, Welsh. There's no doubt that we're suffering from that, but it doesn't mean that we have to suffer. We can be fickle. We can adapt. We can just say, I've had my time with that. Too expensive now, and go and find something else. It's easy. I hope I find some nice things tonight. Whiskey influencer Tim is saying, as time goes on, age statement isn't quite as important. Young whiskey can be wonderful. Looking at Ardnamurchan, exactly, Tim. And Tobias Tobias, he's bought me a dram and said stripped instead of filtered. Sounds right, Roy. It's way more true to what happens. Thank you, Tobias. We don't always know when we're sipping two glasses together, whether one's chill filtered and one isn't. But over the course of our journey through drinking hundreds of chill filtered whiskies and hundreds of non-chill filtered whiskies, we instinctively know, we through experience learn, and we just absolutely understand that more experience and more engagement comes from non-chill filtered product. Jimmy Legge is saying, if you don't soon mention Kilkerran, we're going to have to fight. Well, I have Kilkerran, sorry, Jimmy, right here. There's plenty of Kilkerran to talk about because they have at least one release every year, probably two releases every year of Kilkerran 8-year-old single-digit age statement. It's their cask strength release. Their 12-year-old and their 16-year-old are at 46% ABV, but the 8-year-old is coming out at cask strength. Now, you would wonder, what about, more mature and cask strength? Let's just celebrate and be grateful for the positives. We've got a distillery down there in Campbelltown bringing a super, super flavoursome whiskey. Different every time. Every time it's different. Even when they used the two releases, the 57.1 sherry, recharge sherry release that they had a couple of years back. And then they followed it up with this 56.9 sherry cask release as well. They were very, very different, and very different to the 2022 sherry release. And then that was also released alongside the port cask. Now, when these come out at retail, I know how much you're paying for them now. I know it's ridiculous. But when these came out at retail, these were very, very transparent products, and they were very, very good value too. We can't not talk about single-digit age statements, Jimmy, and not talk about Kilkerran. It might even be one that I pour. but I did promise you an indie. Anthony Lambert saying, I love that Kilchoman are being so open on their website about the ages of the whiskey in bottles like Sannock and Loch Gorm, two naturally presented and delicious drams. That's right. I mean, it's difficult for them to be completely transparent, but distilleries like Ardnamurchan and distilleries like Bruichladdich are able to do it. I would like to encourage Kilchoman to come along in that direction. Interesting to see that there are some mature releases. The Fashil from this year was a 16-year-old. That's stunning, isn't it? 16-year-old Kilchoman, that new distillery, right? But yeah, I agree with you, Anthony. And Peter Morris is saying the Lager 8 somehow feels peatier than the 16. It absolutely is. Certainly on the neck pour, might be the fact that sherry isn't involved or even diminishing peat notes given the aging, or is it ABV? I think it's certainly got a lot to do with ABV. ABV has been proven in the past, and we know our whiskey teaches us that higher ABV, especially as we go along our journey, is a fantastic delivery mechanism for flavour, mouthfeel, texture, grip. How we interact, organoleptically interact with whiskey has got so much to do with ABV. It's just a thing. It is easy to get caught up on it. We have to teach ourselves to relax a little bit about ABV and not just judge the whiskey on the ABV, but to taste first. But we know it's a little bit like comparing the chill filtered and unchill filtered, that we know, as our experience tells us, that we tend to have much more meaningful experiences with higher ABV product. And it doesn't mean that we're getting a face on for alcohol, because the higher the ABV, the more we need to slow down with it. You can't just knock back cask strength whiskies. You're forced to take time. You're forced to do fussy things like take a dropper and add water little by little by little and try and find out where it's at its peak. All these really cool, fun, flavor forward things that we like to do with whiskey. I would also say the second thing, Peter, is about age. That peat, generally, the phenolic decay over time is a real thing. And if you want a peat smoke blast, if that's your thing, you're going to, we've known this, the peat heads have known this for years, that they're going to get much more of that from a younger, bolder whiskey. Maybe why it's been easy for Ardbeg to release a 5-year-old and Lagavulin to release an 8-year-old, right? Maybe it was obvious that they would be amongst the first to do so. And Tommy Elmer is saying, except for Campbelltown, doesn't seem to be enough of that. I wonder what you're talking about, Tom. I wonder if you're talking about the value thing. Not everything from value from Campbelltown is good value. Sometimes we have to pay a premium on a lot of products depending on what it is. Let's put this Lagavulin to the side. And I know what you're thinking. Why is he starting with a peaty whiskey? It's a bit of a myth that you always have to build up to peat. Peat, what does saturate your palate a wee bit more, and it does mean that, you maybe want to, in a flight, if you've got one or two peaty ones there, put them to the end of the flight, certainly. That's probably best practice. But you can still enjoy unpeated whiskies on the back of peated whiskies. Don't make that mistake. You might not be able to analyze it in the way you normally would. It might not be the perfect way to enjoy a flight of whiskies or a whiskey, but you can still enjoy an unpeated whiskey on the back of a peated whiskey. And I'll go as far to say that sometimes sipping an unpeated whiskey or a lightly peated whiskey on the back of a peated one brings out flavors and aspects that you might not have otherwise noticed. It's interesting that of the whiskies that I'm going to share with you tonight, the ones that I brought along out of my single-digit age statement open bottles, the Ardbeg 8's over there as well. It's another peaty one, but these are all peated or have a little bit of peat in it. And I think that's significant. Where we're going to go later tonight, if you've looked at this poll that I'll encourage anybody to vote in, I'm dropping in the link in the live chat on YouTube one more time. So if you want to vote in this poll, drop in. You just leave a quick checkbox. You can vote up to 2 products, and that'll decide what I'm going to actually be uncorking tonight. I'll kill it off in a minute. We've got 161 votes in already. We've got, looks like we've got 3 in the lead so far. I'm not going to look at what they are right now. I'll come back to that in a little bit when you've all had a chance to vote. But it's interesting that the ones that I've picked have all incidentally been peated. I mentioned the Ardbeg Wee Beastie. I wasn't blown away by this. I was kind of ambivalent about this product. I don't know what I was expecting from it, but Now this is available for about £33, £34. The price is in check now. This is a good value proposition here. We've got 47.4% ABV. We've got an age statement. It's fully natural. It tells us that it's non-chill filtered in the label. It doesn't talk about colouring on the label. It's just normal for the bigger companies not to talk about such a thing. But they do tell you at Ardbeg that they don't colour this whiskey. Or at least they reserve the right, if they don't put it on the label. Anyway, I was on Islay. I've been on Islay. Fortunately, the privileged position to be able to nip over Islay. It's still a journey for me, but I've been over 3 times this year. And every time, I think perhaps the only whiskey that I've sipped every time I've been over has been the Ardbeg 5-year-old. I think I've grown to love it. I think I've grown to really appreciate it and understand what it's about and what it can do. It's a 5-year-old product. We're not expecting it to blow us away with complexity and elegance and balance. It's meant to be quite a chunky thing, I think. The time I enjoyed it most was when I was on a boat and they gave us 5-year-old wee beastie. It's what they were pouring on the boat, and we're going along a fair lick with the wind in our hair and the salt coming up off the sea and sipping the Ardbeg wee beastie. Everything about it just made sense. And I think it takes something like that for you to open your mind a little bit and understand what the value is here. The reason I struggled with it originally is I was paying £40+, closer to 50 to get this. It was in demand and the pricing hadn't settled. And I was a wee bit annoyed that I was having to pay the same for the 10-year-old as I was for the 5-year-old, all other things being equal. However, I'm on my second bottle of this now. I paid 33, I think even less, £32 for this one. And I think it's maybe going to become a bit of a easy share type feature. And it's also going to be something that I can put down in front of friends that are coming into whiskey, and they can see that age statement that says 5 years old and let them understand that it doesn't need to be through the lens I got into whiskey, 10, 12, 14 plus year old whiskies on the shelf. This is modern whiskey, and it's been made, I think, in a slightly different way. We'll get to my theory in a bit. The other whiskies that I've got in front of me, I've obviously got the Kilkerran, as Jimmy has obviously called me on it. But I've also got this interesting one as well. I'll try and hold this up. It's got some writing on it from Ralphie. But you can see the age statement on this, hopefully. 61% ABV. This is a Ben Nevis 4-year-old. This is a wee precious whiskey because I could only buy 1 bottle of this. I actually got 2 bottles of it, but one of them was to be carried over to Texas a few years back, and I did that. So I've only ever had 1 bottle for myself. I think this is going to be the one that I pour tonight. It's very rare I pour this. This was a 4-year-old Ben Nevis. Don't ask me what I paid for this. I think it was 50 quid. I'm not sure. But it was a Ralphie bottle. So I queued up for this. I really wanted this bottle, and I got it from the man himself. He even wrote a wee message on it for me. And I was blown away. Absolutely blown away by a 4-year-old whiskey. It's murky. It's rich and rough around the edges, definitely. It's got the dirty elements of Ben Nevis. It's almost got a kind of greased cloth type aspect to it. It's got a damp note too. Very much like some kind of mechanical environment that you're in, like a garage, like an agricultural garage with, you're imagining oils and the sweet is cooked fruit, fig, jam, maybe even as you could imagine that you're cooking the jam. Aye, a 4-year-old. Let's remind myself what it tastes like. Not elegant. Not clean. It's just shouty, communicative, fires everything. It's brittle, so it breaks up easily. but it's got that industrial lick to it. It's sharp and tart at the end, bitter citrus at the end, salty, complex, challenging, loud, and heavily peated. Ben Nevis as well, smoky. Funny, the smoke's there on the finish. Tom Elmer is saying, yep, when Wee Beastie first came out, it was more dollars than the 10-year-old. Now it's getting better. I think it's demand. Glenn Duncan is saying the conundrum of price point. At the end of the day, I know I can't really afford all the wonderful drams, but I want to try them before I shuffle off my mortal coil. More strength to you, Glenn. That's exactly what drives me. Helen is saying, not a bad dram, the Wee Beastie, but struggled with the typical OTT Ardbeg marketing blurb. Certainly not a Pete Beast to us. That's Helen and Andy. Jumped there, sorry. Molasses is saying, enjoying Adelphi, Ben Nevis, 5-year-old, and it's just fantastic. Absolutely filthy whiskey. Cheers. Good for you, Mike. So you've got another independent. This was bottled by the Good Spirits Companies in Ralphie in Glasgow. So an indie bottling of Ben Nevis at a very young age. Glad you're enjoying it too. And Gordon Fraser is saying, love the Wee Beastie, visceral stuff. That's right. Sometimes we don't always want to just kind of lie down and be pampered and have really delicate, elegant things washing over our palate. Sometimes we want whiskey to remind us that it can be a creature of the rugged side of the land as well. That Ardbeg Wee Beastie, and certainly this Ben Nevis does that. But they're all young whiskies. Does that have to be their thing? Dominic Fife is saying, wasn't Talisker originally bottled at 8 before becoming a 10 in the classic malts? You're ahead of the curve tonight, Dominic. Absolutely. Whiskey has followed a wax and wane over 50 years. Let's just have it in my lifetime, 50 years of my lifetime. As we come out of the 60s and into the 70s, there's boom time in whiskey. We call it, I refer to it as the Hollywood boom. I don't know anybody else that refers to it as that, but that's what I'm talking about. Rocks glasses and ice cubes, crystal cut glasses, big heavy things, square-sided things, drinking whiskey, drinking it neat. Scotsmen telling each other that they don't put anything in their whiskey and all of this nonsense. But on TV, they've got ice cubes and they're occasionally putting mixers and things in it. Scotch, they're drinking their Scotch. That's what's happening. This is the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. That's what's happening. And then bang, suddenly it's an old man's drink, and we've got sparkling wines, and everybody wants to learn about wine. We've got white spirits, cocktail bases, we've got vodka, we've got gin, we've got alternatives to these brown spirits. And it falls flat on its face. And it's been gradually marketing itself out of validity. No steps were taken in the 70s to try and adjust and pivot and make whiskey fresh. No meaningful ones, at least, and certainly not industry-wide. And it found itself in a situation that it was suddenly not in demand. Now, not everyone who drank whiskey stopped drinking whiskey, but a significant enough amount of people meant that it was in trouble. We know about what happened in the late 70s and into the early 80s, to the point that in the worst year that we've seen, north of 11 distilleries were closed in 1983 alone. Big, meaningful malt-producing distilleries. And the whiskey that they'd been producing throughout the 60s and the 70s was sitting there. Now, admittedly, there was a couple of things going on there. It's all very complex. You've got product being made for blends, and you've got product being made to be much higher quality, to be the real flavor element, the top dresser, the quality part of blends. But for the most part, the malt component you've got is filler. And their job is to be that consistently, time after time after time, but more importantly, to do it efficiently, time after time after time. Yield, efficiency. That's what was being chased. Did they take the eye off quality? Yes, they did, but not all the time. Speak to anybody that drinks malt whiskies from the 60s and the 70s, if they're in that privileged position, and they'll tell you that they're wonderful whiskies, but they also are tasting whiskies that's been in cask for a hell of a long time. And if it hasn't been, it's been in glass for a hell of a long time. There was lots of ropey young whiskey about in the 60s, 70s, and 80s as well, make no mistake. The 90s, it's a different prospect altogether. All that whiskey that there's been no demand for, broad brushing, has been sitting there for a long time. The malt community knows about it, and they're drinking it and enjoying it. And malt is continuing to build in popularity year after year through the 80s and the 90s and into the 2000s. This is the golden period. This is when you could pick up gold for buttons. Those days are gone now. I wasn't into whiskey during those days. I came just a little bit too late. But you were able to pick up some fantastic whiskies for ridiculously low cost. Yes, it can be argued that whiskey was undersold back then, and it'd be absolutely true. More than that, they were overaging the whiskies. So when you saw a 10-year-old product, that was heavily loaded with much older whiskey, the same for a 12 and a 14 and onwards. It was common practice to make these whiskies very, very good because there wasn't a lot of value in the product back then. There wasn't a lot of knowledge or awareness. That flipped quite quickly. Now we find ourselves in a position where the industry is trying to catch up again, and we've seen expansion happen for the last 2 decades. Malt whiskey, if you compare it to 2005 when I got into whiskey, malt whiskey capacity, what's been made year on year, in terms of theoretical capacity at least, is more than double in the space of 15 years. I'll go further than that. I think that there's much less focus on just making a product to go into a blend, a filler, a baseline, whatever that malt is required to be. I think there is much more focus on making it as good as it can be. Not everybody everywhere, but the malts that we're enjoying, the reason you're hanging out with me in the vPub is to drink those whiskies. Malt whiskey is made differently today than it was in the 70s. People are thinking about the grains. They're studying the grains heavily. They're not just interested in which grain the most litres of pure alcohol per tonne anymore. They're interested in flavour. When they handle that grain and when they mash that grain, do we want cloudy, clear? And what difference does that make to the product? How does that help our process in our whiskey? How can we bring the flavour and the fruit and everything out of that in the mash? How can we make the wort exactly what we want it to be? They've got an eye on efficiency, but it's not the be-all and end-all. When it goes into fermentation, everybody's talking about fermentation these days. 40-hour fermentations done and dusted, that's gone now. People are talking about 70-hour, 80, 90, way more than 100-hour fermentations as being regular right across the board. What's the best fermentation rather than the quickest and most efficient? And when it comes to distillation as well, being very careful with how that whiskey is produced now. Why? Because now they are making whiskey first and foremost for malt, not to be a component for blends. Even with the huge, I'm not just talking about the Ardnamurchans and the new distilleries on the scene. I'm not just talking about Springbank and all of these people that have been doing that for a long, long time. I'm talking about huge scale distilleries like Tomatin, who have managed to pivot in the last 15 years and focus hugely on their malt selection. The volume might still be on the other side of their business. I don't know Tomatin's business, but I guarantee you the margin, certainly as a ratio, is much higher on the premium side. Luna Aaron is saying, is it still true that even if capacity of malt whiskey has doubled, that it's still only 10% of total producer's capacity? I'm not sure. I think it's higher than 10% now, but 10%, what you're talking about there, Luna, is by volume. If you talk about it by value, you're up at 40% and beyond. Blends, up 1 year, down the next, depending on the market, depending on the product, up and down, up and down. I mean, the growth is pretty linear. It's flat. It's almost flat. They need new markets to open up. And by the way, markets that aren't making their own domestic product, which is becoming less and less as time goes on. Blends are flat. The growth is in premium whiskies, Scotch whiskies. If we talk about Scotch, it's in malt, premium blends too, but that's where it is. Jimmy Legg has bought me a dram. Anyone who's access to whiskey auctions can still live the dream. Those are the people I'm so jealous of. Jimmy, I know I always feel it for you where you are in the world, I know. But listen, I have access to whiskey auctions as well. And the things that are the stuff of dreams are not within my reach anyway. However, I should be grateful. I'm privileged to be in a position that I could nip on to the whiskey auctions and pick up a Ralphie Ben Nevis 4-year-old if I wanted and have it delivered in a matter of days or pick it up. We are privileged, Jimmy. You're right, but I'll thank you for your dram, my friend. Cheers. The point I would like to try and focus on tonight, and I don't know if the whiskies you pick for me to open are going to prove that, whiskey has been made differently today. So if we view a single digit age statement, maybe we can either compare it to the heyday of when whiskey was amazing, if you have those rose tinted kind of nostalgic specs on, or you have to consider it in the context of today's malt, which has been made with much more care for a different audience. Back in the 70s, there wasn't any 48% Lagavulins kicking around. It just didn't exist. Back in the 80s, there weren't cast strength products. You had to go to Cadenheads. You had to go to Gordon MacPhail. Like even then, Gordon MacPhail were tended to be low ABV too. You had to go to specialist retailers to get that higher ABV thing. The market has changed perhaps more than anything now, and that's forcing whiskey to change too. And I think overall, it's a good thing. If we can encourage the transparency, but also look at the product with a bit less cynicism, or certainly hope that it's not coming to us or being presented to us with cynicism, I think we put ourselves in a better place. Because then what we'll do is we'll taste the whiskey based on the experience and what we pay for it, perhaps, sure. But we'll consider it not about the bottle specs and the age, but much more about the value proposition, because we've tried it. Listen to each other as a community, talk about the whiskies that bring that extra value. Chris Banks Wildlife, I'm going to switch this poll off in a second. Let's see if we can hit, where are we, 186. I'll drop the link in once more, see if we can hit 200 votes. It doesn't need to hit 200. It doesn't really matter at all. But I'll put that in. If you want to vote on what whiskies you want me to open tonight, and I'll do a screen share here. I wanted to open that gold spot, and it was number 1, and I'm looking at it now, and it's crept back to number 4. So yeah, I'll show you. I'll do a screen share so that legitimately I'm going to be opening the whiskies that's voted for. But that link I've just dropped into the live chat on YouTube. If you're watching on the replay, it'll be gone. It'll be closed now. But just a little bit of interaction here with the people that's tuning in. I'll open one of these. While you're voting, let me just hold them up on screen here so you can see what they all are. You can visibly see them. This is the Ben Nevis that's currently doing quite well in the voting. This is a Deerstalker Ben Nevis. Deerstalker is typically a 40% whiskey. It's usually a Balmenic product, or what was the other one? It was Braes of Glenlivet. It was a Breval or a Balmenic, I think, in the past. A hidden malt whiskey, but no, this is different. This is cast strength. This is 61% ABV, a 9-year-old Ben Nevis from Deerstalker. It was about £62. I've got a blended Scotch whiskey as well. This is another Thompson Brothers Hit It Out the Park product. I got to try this. It's pretty good, pretty easy drinking. 46% ABV. It's a blended Scotch. There's grain in here as well. Very sherry forward in profile. Very easy drinking. 6-year-old age statement, £33. I don't know how much I paid for it. Thompson Brothers, £34, £33.50 of that order. I think maybe £33.95. We've also got the most recent addition to Glenallich's range here. We've got the official Glenallachie 8-year-old. Now, a lot of people at the time were saying, why has this got dropped down to 8 years old? What's going on here? What's going on here? Remember that Billy Walker is making everything with inherited stock. You could argue that the younger the whiskey is, the more influence he's had on that whiskey throughout its life. Billy Walker's whole sales proposition right now is based on cask fettling, cask. It's going to be super interesting to see how Billy Walker affects the product when his own spirit comes into the mix. And when that happens, it's going to be with a younger age statement on it, if it has one at all. So we're going to try this tonight. The cask makeup of this, to me, is very reminiscent of the 10-year-old cask strength, which has been a super runaway success. You can't buy the 10-year-old cask strength when it comes out in the UK. It's very, very difficult. So I think what they've done here is a 46% version of that, a couple of years younger, maybe access to more stock, make it a bit more available. The price is very close to the 12-year-old, if we were to be cynical or critical about it, £42-ish, £42.50. And the 12-year-old's sitting about 45, 46, so quite close. But remember, we're going to try and lead with flavour prospect tonight. I've got an indie here. I've got a a Tullibardine from Murray McDavid, 46% ABV. This was not too expensive. This was about £29. But look at the age on this. This Tullibardine here, this is a brave thing. 4 years old. Tullibardine, not the sexiest whiskey distillery on the planet. I've got a Murray over there that I'm enjoying very much. When it comes natural with a bit higher ABV, it has a value prospect. Independent Tullibardines are very interesting. They can be hit and miss. It is a try before you buy, honestly speaking, especially the older stock. But this is very young. This is a much more modern take on Tullibardine. This is much more representative of what's been made there in recent years. 4 years old. Very reasonable price. I've got, just interestingly on the back of that, I've also got another Tullibardine here as well. Slightly older one. And look at this. You can see me through this. Can you see me? Look how pale that is. But it's a fully natural colour. 7 years old. Again, that 4-year-old. I'd say the 4-year-old is even darker, isn't it? The 4-year-old is just, I don't know how the camera's going to show up, but the 4-year-old is probably 1 or 2 notches darker. It's all to do with the cask, because both of these are fully natural whiskies. We've also got the gold spot here that I know that a few of you are hoping that will open tonight. I'm kind of hoping that will open this tonight. The 9-year-old single pot still Irish whiskey, 51.4% ABV, slightly higher ABV. This was released to celebrate their 135th anniversary, which is quite amazing because they almost disappeared. This was Mitchell's 135th anniversary. 9 years old. My problem with this is I'm asking a lot of this whiskey. This is £100 whiskey here. It's got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. Another PG one here. This is very well known. Enjoyed by a lot here. We've got a Port Asking 8 years for 5.8% ABV. Very good value, £40. My flicking here, is the Wi-Fi okay? I'm not on Wi-Fi. Is the internet connection okay? But this is a great value whiskey. About £40. So when you're in a huff with your Arbex, and you're in a huff with Lefroy, and you're in a huff with Lagavulin, or whoever else it may be, Port Asking has got your back. I believe right now there are some pricier Port Askings out there, but there's usually a story behind it as well. I know a lot of you are enjoying this 8-year-old Port Asking. 2 more to share with you. Jeff Whiskey mentioned this one earlier on. This is a Master of Malt, an Atom brand special. I hadn't pulled the trigger on this at all. This is playing on that old famous t-shirt, isn't it? Christmas cake and dark chocolates and medjool. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that well. Dates and cinnamon. It's got little holly and berries here on the label, so it's clearly hanging around from last Christmas. But I paid for this one £40. It's interesting in that it has an age statement on it. Some of this range did not. 8 years old, and it's 48% ABV. Some of this range had a 40% ABV. Curious about that sherry forward as well, I'm led to believe. And here we've got something very odd. Just before I shut down this vote, this poll, and pull out the vote, I have something that we don't often see. This is a Glen Cooper. And I think the reason that we don't often see Glen Cooper, and we're seeing it now, this is a 5-year-old Chininik at 46% ABV. It tells me on the back that it is coloured. It tells me with colorant mit Farbstoff. And it's from Aseo Spirits. I think the reason that we are seeing this is that this would normally go off to Russia. It would normally be fed through Latvia or directly into Russia. I think that that's where the market is for this product. That's cut off now, so I think we're seeing a lot of it available here. So maybe this is indicative of what maybe somebody in Eastern Europe or something would be seeing Scotch whisky as. But I think it's still quite a niche product. I don't know how much of this is around. This is the first bottle of Glen Cooper I've had at 5 years old. So hopefully that's me covered all those 9 whiskies. Let's go into the vote. 236 votes. We blew that away. I'm going to switch it off now. Not taking any more votes. We've got a clear winner. My goodness, that's incredible. That just come from nowhere. So what we'll do here is I will just take this window alone, and I'll bring it over here. I'll blow it up to full size and do a wee bit of a screen share. Let's hope I can make this work for you. Share screen. There we go. That's working, isn't it? Let's make the background a little bit less distracting. So, and let me see if I can blow it up a bit. Get rid of that. Okay, hopefully you can see that now. Gold Spot looks to be in third place now. Ben Nevis 9-year-old is in second. So I'm going to be drinking a Ben Nevis 9. That's the Deerstalker. And the one that's run away in front is that Glenallachie 8-year-old, come from nowhere. Less of you interested in the Indies, the Thompson brothers, the Atom brands, the Elixir Port Askig. Port Askig and Thompson doing very well. And Dramore Tullibardine. With the other Tullibardine, probably that's the thing I talked about, with that being a less sexy distillery, and the Chininic 5-year-old drawn up the rear along with the Atom Brands one. But there we go, we have it. Let's bring them forward so I remember which ones I'm opening here. The Gold Spot is third, Ben Nevis second, Deerstalker Ben Nevis. And obviously everybody wants to know about Billy Walker's Glenallachie. So there we have it. There we have it. Let's get them opened and poured then. I hope you think that was a wee fun exercise to do. A nice little bit of interactivity there. Something that we can, rather than me just deciding what to open all the time, it means that you guys can get involved a little bit too. All right, let's start with the Gold Spot. Let's go to the Ben Nevis and finish with the Billy Walker. We'll go 3, 2, 1. As I mentioned to you, I saw this coming out. I saw the price and I went, nah, not for me. I didn't chase it at all. It's £120 most retailers in the UK. I think Master of Malt had it 110. I didn't have the money at the time. It was summer for me. Things were tight. Not touching it, but I wanted it. I was curious. It's funny how that does that, enthusiast, right? We want it, we want it. We know it's difficult to justify at times, but we really want to try it and taste it. Jimmy Legacy and I may have voted for Ben Nevis more than once. I'm not sorry. So you worked out, Jimmy, that I didn't lock down the one vote only. To lock it down to one vote only, I would have had to ask you for your email address. No need to do that tonight. No problem to you. It made it through, Jimmy. I wanted this whiskey. What's for you doesn't go past you. So I was in Texas and I was with Scott from the Scotch Test Dummies. We're driving quite a long distance. Texas is massive. From North Texas down to Austin, and we were stopping in off-sales liquor stores along the way. And I wasn't really finding anything that I particularly wanted to buy, but there was one bottle of this on the shelf for $100 or just over $100 maybe. I didn't do the pop. How dare I not do the pop and the pour? I just pour a wee bit. It's quite a rich colour on this. 9-year-old Gold Spot, single pot still Irish. I'm going to place it there so I know that that's what it is, and I'll put the glass next to it. I don't have coloured markers or anything on the glass. Now let's just get the whiskies breathing as much as we can. Let's get the Ben Nevis open. So Deerstalker, as I mentioned to you, we know Deerstalker is a brand through their fairly small batch, but not so small, the Deerstalker outturns that they do. Oh, tight cork. Oh dear. But this is a departure. This is a single malt, named single malt that they're doing from Ben Nevis. Again, like the Gold Spot, 9 years old. Wee bit pricey. Not nearly as pricey as the Gold Spot. It was £62. It is 61% ABV though. So it's quite punchy. Lots of Ben Nevis that you see, that's to do with the casking strength at Ben Nevis. Many Ben Nevises tend to be north of 60% ABV. The one I had from Ralphie, also 61%. Is that the same? 61? I think it is. 61.1% ABV. But Ralphie's is 4-year-old. This is a 9-year-old. And finally, Glenallachie. Billy Walker's. It's difficult to separate Glenallachie from Billy Walker, isn't it? Sometimes I wonder if we're not being totally fair to the entire team that's at that distillery and everything that's going on there. It's, we talk about Billy all the time. One more clean glass. I think it's going to be quite easy to tell these apart, given the colour of this Glenallachie. It's a little bit of red wine barrique in here, a little bit of virgin oak, lots of Pedro Jimenez and lots of Oloroso. Very typical Glenallachie style. 8 years old, 46% ABV. Now, if I look at this logically, if I'm going to treat this as a flight, I should probably go Gold Spot first, then Glenallachie, and finish with the Deerstalker, because even if it's not heavily peated Ben Nevis, there's a chance that it's going to be quite funky. But we're talking about some of the older whiskies. While we let these three breathe over here at the side, somebody's been mentioning Talisker, and Lagavulin wasn't a 16 in the past. Before the classic malts, it was a 12-year-old. Lots of younger whiskies. Somebody mentioned a Glenfiddich I think it was in the 70s, there was an 8-year-old version of the Glenfiddich. But look at this one. Imagine if you've ever been to Italy and you see Glen Grant, there's a 5-year-old age statement on it. Now, I know that in Italy they drink it a bit differently. They're usually throwing it over ice or putting a little bit of a mixer in it, or even Coke and lemonades and things. They are drinking it differently. It's a hot climate, Mediterranean climate down there, but they're quite happy to pick up a 5-year-old Glen Grant down there, and it's the most popular malt whiskey. This is a Tormoer. This is something that I didn't pick this up at auction. Cousin Kevin picked this one up, I believe, and gifted it to me. This is the Grenada Bottle. You can see that why it would be called a Grenada Bottle, with this kind of patchwork quilt type bottle, quite a strange looking bottle, very much a product of the 70s, right? You can just imagine this being in a 70s ad. But look at that age statement. Very, the single biggest thing on this whole bottle, even bigger than the capital T for Tormoer, is that 5-year-old age statement. 40% ABV, 750 mils as it was back in the 70s. 5-year-old whiskey, stripped, coloured, within an inch of its life, as it was back in the day. I don't love this. This is a challenging whiskey to drink, but I'm not drinking an example of when it was fresh back in the 70s. I'm drinking something that's been in glass for potentially 45 plus years. It's not being particularly fair to it. My point being, single-digit age statements, up until the dynamics that I've discussed earlier in the vPub, were very much part of the landscape. Is there colouring added in the 8-year Glenallachie? Erwin, absolutely not. I would be shocked. Billy is spending so much money on wood, and he's getting so much activity out of his wood that I don't think there's any caramel colouring on site of Glenallachie at all. I'd really be shocked. There's no colour on it. In fact, will it tell me natural colour? I'm sure it would. No colour added. It is stated on the label. So there we go. Nothing to talk about. And it does say non-chill filtered as well. Natural presentation. So as much whether you love or hate or somewhere in between the Glenallachies, I'm somewhere in between, they're bringing us natural product, and that in itself needs to be celebrated. And look at the colour they're getting it out at 8 years old. And if I show you in the glass as well, it's incredible. If I show you to the Gold Spot 9-year-old, it's even much darker than that. It's a story of casks. It's all about cask. The better quality the cask, I suppose, the less colour you need to use to reach that market expectation, right? We need to change the market expectation. Don't change the colour of a natural product. Change the market expectation. Education. It's easy to share the stories now these days. Glenn Anderson's bought me a dram saying open the Chininik, my favourite distillery. Glenn, if I don't open it tonight, when I do open it, I'll let you know how it goes. It's one of my favourites too. I've got a bunch of Chininik, as you know. Okay, let's start with our Gold Spot. This is by far the most expensive whiskey here tonight. I think it's a bit too expensive. I think this is all about premiumization. It's a very nice label. It's in the standard kind of gold or the standard spot series label, bottling and label. We're getting a bit extra ABV here, not as high ABV as the Blue Spot, but we're getting 51.4 ABV. All the rest of the range tends to be 46, and the entry-level Green Spot is 40. This is a different prospect. I expect that to be natural colour. but I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't mention these pretty important touch points, right? And I know it's a different style of whiskey, this single pot style Irish. So as well as malted barley in the mash here, we've got unmalted barley. One of my favourite styles of whiskey, honestly. It's a good nose on this. But I have to say, putting my nose in it first, it's very cask-driven nose. It's quite a rich whiskey here. It's okay. I would almost go as far to say that maybe you would potentially draw yourself towards the bourbon spectrum. If you're used to drinking Scotch, you're going to pick up a wee bit of a solvent note on here, but it's not bad, it's not negative, and it's not overpowering. Some people say acetone, but it's here. Sweet berry fruit. Sweet. Not strawberry, but, you know, kind of brambles and blackberries and it's quite thick on the nose. How can something smell thick? You know what I'm talking about. It's a richer prospect than I might have expected. Cheers, everyone. Oh, wow. It's rich. It's much more bourbon forward than I expected. And by bourbon, I'm not just talking about American oak casks. I'm talking about very sweet. The ABV is playing here, 51.4, but I've had higher ABV tonight. Remember, we're talking about a neck pour. Always remember that. This whiskey has not had time to settle. I brought it back on Monday, so it's been here a few days, but it's only just been uncorked. A wee bit of water in it. See if we can quieten things down a bit. My goodness, I think I would. Terrible at blind tasting. If you were tuning into Iron Root last week, you'll have spotted that. I picked out a bourbon as the malt that night, and I'm exact opposite way around tonight. I think this is obviously all barley that's in this, but this is tasting so sweet and so bourbon forward. This needs a wee bit of time, but on first approach, and I reserve the right to change my mind tomorrow and next week, and I will update you if I have an epiphany moment with this whiskey. First impressions, that's all this can ever be, is first impressions. What am I missing in the chat? Both of them are frozen. I would be a wee bit miffed at £120 for this. Blue Spot was thick and heavy. I never had a bottle of Blue Spot, never had a bottle of Red Spot either. Yellow Spot used to be a regular here until I couldn't afford it anymore. Green Spot, Montelena, Chateau Leoville Barton, both sit here. Green Spot, 40%. It's one of my treasures of a 40% whiskey. I love it. And it's all to do with the texture, a texture that I really love and enjoy. This, what's coming forward here is oak, oak, oak. There is flavour here. There's stuff to explore. There's spice, wood spice. But I'm struggling to get to it. It's very bourbon forward. I would consider that I'm drinking a decent, honestly, bourbon, but £120? Jimmy Legg is asking what Kevin paid at auction. Is that for the Tormore? Knowing Kevin, he would have picked it up for buttons. 30, 40 quid probably. Not much more than that. Top Shelf Dustin is saying, of course, blue was thick and heavy. It was cast strength. Well, Green Spot, 40% ABV is thick and oily. It's ridiculously thick and oily for a 40% whiskey. And this one is 51.4. I'm not suggesting that's cast strength, but 9 years old, I would think it has been reduced a little bit, but it's not, cast strength doesn't necessarily mean thick and heavy. Rob Halford is saying, let's just leave it at that. Quell all the FOMO the Irish fans are feeling right now. But they're completists as well. And this is what's happening here. They've done the green. They've done extra finishes, wine finishes for the green. They've done the yellow. They've done the red and they've done the blue. And now, to premiumize, they've gone gold. They've invented a thing that, to my understanding, didn't exist before. Listen, I'm going to let them celebrate their 135th anniversary, whatever it may be. But we've got a 9-year-old product here at 51.4% ABV, and they're charging £120 for it. So I'm not judging this on the specs on the label. I'm actually judging it for £120 worth of whiskey. And a wee bit disappointed. I'm glad to have it because I can talk about it. I can spend time with it. And as time goes on, I'll find ways to share with you more about what my thoughts are. But that needs a bit of time. Let's move on to our Glenallachie now. I'm expecting I should try to be open-minded. Lol, knowing Kevin, that's meanish. No, he's got an eye for a bargain, or Kevin. I mean that in a very positive way, Jimmy. Personally, for me, says Connor Smith, this is my issue with a lot of Irish, a lot of money for little, giving back on flavour and experience. There is a lot of flavour in here, but it's not, first few sips, it's not wow. It's not like, it's very pedestrian. It's very okay and obvious and sweet. It's almost coming across a wee bit engineered, you could argue. Top Shelf Dustin saying, thanks. I didn't know the gold was over 50%. Good info. I was surprised as well. You might have saw me stutter Dustin earlier on when I picked it up. I was just about to say 46%, and I clocked again. I reminded myself when I bought it, it was 51.4, but I did assume in my head it was 46 at that time. So now I'm immediately back in much more familiar territory. A lot of sherry on the nose here. Good, clean sherry, sweet sherry, and all the fruit that brings. So I'm thinking sweet plum, prunes and juice. Looking for a wee bit of spice, a wee bit of vibrance about it at 8 years old. No, it's a sweet thing. Looking for a wee bit of influence from the wine, I believe there to be in this. Not really. This is just a delicate, sweet, rounded sherry bomb on the nose. But when I say sherry bomb, I'm not in the European oak territory. I'm in the sweeter side, cleaner, sweeter, much more linear. American oak style. But inviting. This is warmth. This is autumnal to me. This is wanting. This is a nice one to pour. Way richer than my experience of the Glenallachie 12-year-olds, although some of the recent Glenallachie 12s are so dark, it's quite incredible. I'm judging from the time when Billy Walker was first putting out the 12 for a couple of years. They were much lighter. They've become darker year on year. Let's have a wee sip. What brother Ray is saying, let's see your happy face. Cold spot scared it away. Cheers, Ray. There's a wee bit of the wine thing on the palate there. It's in check, it's not too bad. changes very, very quickly. Sweet, gloopy arrival. Immediately you get hit with a big burst of spice that I didn't get on the nose. The spice is there. It's there on the palate right now as well. Quickly changes into a big pop of, it's not effervescence, but it's grip, it's texture, it's clanging. And then it quickly drifts into much more kind of typical spice, sherry, clean sherry, fruit notes, plum, stewed plums, dark brown sugars. Let's coat the palate a wee bit more again. This is alive. That's amazing, because I was always ambivalent about the 12-year-old. I understood why everyone was celebrating it because it was a damn good whiskey, but for me, it just didn't have a hook. I think what's bringing the hook here is the youth. I think what's making this alive is the 8-year age, with the 8-year-old age statement is almost playing like a positive here. I think that people would sip this and put it at 50% ABV. So know that the 8-year-old spirit in here is telling you that it's younger. But this is a good thing. This is a positive thing. Too much of the Glenallachie story, I'm sorry, I don't want to say anything about a producer that's breaking their backs to put out the best whiskey they can, because that's what they're doing, but it's too much of a cask story. Almost an inevitability that that's going to be the case for a while. This, suddenly, you're holding up a Glenallachie, and this is, we had to go to the 10-year-old cask strength to get this, to get the spirit to be able to put its head over the parapet and give us a bit of the spirit in there, a bit of whiskey sense, rather than just all cask and Pedro Jimenez or Oloroso or wine casks or virgin oak or whatever they were using. What we've got here is the youth of the spirit bringing some vibrance to things, bringing a little bit of switch and flicker and transformation over the palate. I'm sorry, but this, and I'm surprised by this, this is £42 and it blows the experience of that Gold Spot 9 completely out of the water. I reserve the right to change my mind tomorrow, but this is the whiskey I want to sit and drink with friends. This is the ones I want them to taste. This is what I want them to experience. That's a good buy. That's a good purchase. It's a bit sailing a bit close to the price of the 12. So either the price is going to bump up. That's not why I'm mentioning it. I would prefer that this was sub 40. For an 8-year-old product, I know it's becoming really tough for them to do that. And I'm probably, they're probably heaving big sighs of, the ABV is the same. The cask is very similar. Okay, the cask strength of a similar casking, we would have to pay 55 north. But 42, maybe you could argue that the 12 is their high volume and it's been sold a wee bit cheaply. I don't know, 45, 46 pounds for the 12. But the price is close. But I will concede £42 for this, £45 for the 12, I'm buying this. Based on my experience, based on my run-ins with the 12-year-old. Suddenly our wee Ben Nevis has got a bit of work to do. Top Shelf Dustin's saying, did you get the metallic note that seems to bother some with their malt, or is this one without? If you're sensitive to a metallic note, maybe you'd pick it up in this. Right at the end, there's a little bit of a flicker towards something that I pick up as a wee bit almost saccharine-like, but I often tend to pick that up from maybe something like a virgin oak or a heavily oaky tannic product. I don't know if that's the metallic note you're getting. When I pick up a metallic note, almost like you're one of those kind of well-worn kind of old brass forks or something like that, I know what you mean about metallic notes. I'm not getting it in this. This is much more kind of sweet sherry, sweet cooked fruits, spice, wee bit of chili heat mid palate, in a very, very positive way. I'm not speaking about chili heat as in like high ABV alcohol. I'm talking about a nice big burst of spice and grip. I want to go back again. People that know me know that I'm not a sherry lover. It has to be something like something that's really communicative to get me involved. Soft, gentle sherries, that's nice just to kind of drink and think about nothing. If you're after smooth or something, those are great whiskies, but they're not going to attract my attention. This wee 8-year-old Glenallachie is grabbing my attention. Pleased with that. Okay, let's have a wee palate cleanse here. It's thick. It's sitting here. It doesn't want to leave. Let's get into the Ben Nevis. Deerstalker, I guess they're parading as an independent bottler. They don't have a Wild Scotland collection, this is, 9-year-old. By the way, I picked this up in no knowledge of what this whiskey was. I picked it up at Good Spirits Company earlier this week. Was it? It wasn't Tuesday, yesterday. Distilled on the 29th of November 2012. 588 bottles from a sherry butt. So this is single cask. Oh, this is important. No, it is from a single cask, technically speaking, but it looks like from September 2020. So this is a sherry finish. So I'm going to guess here what they've done is they've taken 2 hoggies or 2 barrels and put them into a sherry cask for a couple of years to bring us this 9-year-old. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm not pricking up this whiskey and comparing it on its own in isolation. I'm coming on the back of the gold spot in the Glenallachie. And this is spirit forward. This is all about the spirit. And I'm loving it for it. Straight away, you're just drawn into some kind of really outdoor experience. Like fresh, vibrant outdoors. So you can start to... So Ben Nevis is always kind of a dirtier malt for me. It's always murkier. It's always dark. But I think that's enhanced by a sherry cask oftentimes. This is kind of fresh. This has not had a lot of sherry going on, just a finish. The sherry butt, potentially a refill butt, I would even go as far to say. This is a clean whiskey. Clean Ben Nevis. On the nose, maybe a bit of outdoors, kind of field agriculture. So rather than a workshop, I'm outdoors. I'm out in the paddock with this one. That's where I am. Maybe even in the fields. There's no manure or any nonsense like that. There's no silage that I'm picking up. But it is outdoorsy. It's not salty. No. If you're brand new into whiskey, if I was sitting across the table from you right now and you were in your first few months of your whiskey journey, I would be holding up this gold spot and I would be holding up this Glenallachie and I would be talking to you about them and you would be able to taste, you would be able to enjoy, and you would get it. I think if I gave you this Ben Nevis, I think you would get heat and you would get pepper and you would get spice and you would be challenged. I think if you come back to me a year or two later and you'd been round all the houses and you'd done as much as you possibly could and you were loving it, I think you would be sitting with me right now and we would be both holding this up saying, aye. It's a 9-year-old whiskey. And I cannot fasten or connect with a single tasting note because it's all over the place. It's flashing and flickering. And it's all about the spirit. So it's clean for a Ben Nevis. No way I'd pick this out as a Ben Nevis. Not typical. Not getting a lot of smoke or peat either. It just dawning on me now. So if this is peated malt, it's lightly peated, or it's certainly well inside the spirit. Maybe I'll leave it for a bit and see if I'm getting any. If you've been watching the vPub for long enough, you'll know that I'm immune to peat. So know that it's clean. This is a slightly acidic thing. It's not, it's a little bit grassy, a little bit outdoors, a little bit wild, a little bit malt driven, fully malt driven. Thick, oily, lightly spiced, clean. Does it taste young? Honestly, yes, but not so young. The right kind of young. Now I'm drinking, as I mentioned, on contrast to the other two. Let's hold it for a bit. Let's go back into the Glenallachie. That's why I love whiskey. There's only a year difference between these two. The Glenallachie is much more presented. It's much more kind of, you know, it's got a heart to it. It's got a fight. It's got a punch to it, but it's much more kind of packaged. The Ben Nevis is just, here's what I am. Here's what I am. That sherry cask has done very, very little. The butt that it's been put into for a couple of years, it's just had it's just kind of signed. Nothing more. Quite incredible. Unbelievable. Time for a dram. Aquavite. Gregor, good to see you. Seriously, where do Lynn's flowers go when you steal her vase for your water jug? Hey, this is, if I'm down to the last 2 or 3 of these now, when all of these are smashed, which glasses get smashed a lot here. I don't know what I'm going to do. This is a pint glass, Gregor. I know you've been away a long time, buddy, but you remember what a pint is, right? And this has been what I've been using for a water glass. There's nothing worse than not having water. So I would rather you made fun of me for having too much water than not enough. Water and whiskey is your friend. And my first Ben Nevis, says Rob Halford, yesterday at Works Whiskey Club, blew my socks off. And I can now understand the draw and shame that so much of it is sent abroad. There's plenty of Ben Nevis out there. There's more Ben Nevis now than there's ever been. This is my opinion. Okay, you're not going to find lots and lots of the mid-90s vintage, and if you find it, you're going to have to pay through the nose for it. But Ben Nevis has always had this ability to bring this really kind of characterful, almost unique, compelling whiskey that was once upon a time, 10 years ago, was super Marmite, but has become in the modern palate much more interesting to talk about. As our palates have changed over time, I think our palates have moved much closer towards things like Ben Nevis that is never dull. Even this is probably the cleanest Ben Nevis I've had, of a young Ben Nevis, certainly. Floral, white lily. This is everything that I'm talking about. All the taste notes are outdoor. And when your taste notes go outdoor and less in the kitchen, I think you tend to be talking more about the spirit and less about the cask. How much was this? £62. For a 9-year-old whiskey, that's a difficult proposition. But for 61.1% of whiskey, if I close down tonight and I've done all the things I have to do and I'm going to have 1 dram, that's the one I'm going to have. Let's indulge Erwin. Jimmy Legacy saying dull is the worst. I'd rather have bad. Let's indulge Erwin. Let's rinse this gold spot glass and open the Chinínic. Somebody else was asking for the Chinínic as well, weren't they? Chinínic is super interesting to me. It's one of Diageo's factories. It's huge. Not that I've seen it, but huge in terms of what it can produce. I'm going to go up to Alness one day. I'm going to go and see Chinook. You cannot visit it. But some of the experiences I've had out of that distillery up there, I was going to say that wee distillery, that big distillery up there, has been really shocking and surprising. Very much my lane, my style of whiskey, but I love the stuff. So when I saw a 5-year-old Chinook presented from an indie at 46% ABV, this is the Ben Nevis, I think, working on me. I apologise. Too much talking and not breathing. At 46% ABV, I just bought it. Now, when it was delivered, I realised on the back that, yeah, it's coloured and things. But I knew that potentially what we were getting was kind of backwash from the whole kind of Eastern Europe thing. So let's see if the Eastern Europeans were being offered our poor stuff. This is for you, Erwin. I'm going to open this. The Whiskey Franco has bought my wee dram to say, joining a bit late as always. Don't worry, Whiskey Franco. There's no such thing as being late to the pub, as I said earlier. But sending a wee dram. Glad to see you back in the vPub, Roy. Hope Texas was fantastic. It really was. I'm a wee bit worried that a lot of you were looking for kind of Texas stories and anecdotes and things tonight, but I kind of did the Texas thing. I did a live stream from there. I hope you enjoyed it and stuff. Maybe in the next Patreon lock-in, the September lock-in for Patreon, we can talk about Texas or whatever if you want to. But for me, the takeaway is it's always about, see, the handshakes and the hugs and the putting faces to names and the anecdotes and the stories and the things and this everything. You just realize that there's not enough time in this day. There's not enough time in this weekend. I don't want to go home yet. Of course I want to go home. I want to be home and see the kids and the family and stuff, but I want more of this. I want more of this interaction. I want more of this, I don't know, fellowship, camaraderie, connectedness. It was fortifying in that respect. I was tired as I've ever been throughout that weekend. And I've been tired since I came home. I think I'm getting old, and a 24-hour or 23-hour, I exaggerate. It was only 23 hours for me to leave home and get to the destination at Dallas Love Field. It was 23 hours of traveling with not too much in the way of delays. It's just the fact. It's just the way it is. So I was a wee bit spent, and I think I've been a wee bit spent this week. Does that mean I would do it again next year? If I can afford it, if I can pay to get there, I'm there. It's the only event that is kind of YouTube focused. I think it would be nice if it was a bit more YouTube focused, but those guys that host that event and invite all of the YouTubers, they get very little back from us. Daniel and Rex, the Whiskey Tribe and the Whiskey Vault, they give to us, they accommodate us, and we don't have a lot that we can give back. And I was very mindful of that as I was there. I didn't feel like an imposter. I didn't feel like I shouldn't be there, not at all. But I was, let's say, conscious of their consideration and their generosity. Well, we were all out there. I think if we could build on that, that would be a super special thing. But it relies a lot on them because of their presence and because of the location and the facilities that they have to host us. Morgan has just signed up as to join Aqua Vitae Barflies. Morgan, thank you so much. If anybody's wondering how to do that, there's a join button if you're on desktop. It's not easy to do if you're on mobile. If you're on desktop, click the join button, and for $1.99 of the currency where you are, you can join the Aqua Vitae Barflies and get access to the loyalty badges and also all the colourful whiskey-themed emoji to colour up the chat. I invite you all, if you're in here now and you're a barfly, to colour the chat with your favourite emoji. I love to see it. David Larenko is saying, a little off topic, last week I did something I found never to regret. I chased a Roy's suggestion. A Speyburn 15 is now the best dram I've tasted. One man's opinion, but what a man. Cheers. If you love heavy, rich, thick, Speyside styles of whiskey, if you're looking for that big bang of Ben Rinnes of Dalyun, specifically Mortlach, and you're struggling to find it or afford it these days, I shouldn't be saying this because I have 1 dram of Speyburn 15 left. How unprofessional to leave the scene. There you go. David. That's all I have left of my Speyburn 15, and I noticed when I went on to replace that recently, it was out of stock. So wherever you are, if you can get that at the 55 to 60 pounds that it's at, it's an absolute barnstormer whiskey. It's a peach of a whiskey. And Bruno's saying, I totally agree. We have to taste it together. David, I don't know where you are, but if you're near Bruno out there in Lisbon, I think you're in Lisbon. I know you're in Portugal, Bruno. But if you can get together to drink it, that would be amazing. Make sure I get to hear about it so I can join you too. Okay, I look at Gino Kumo is lighting up with the emoji. He's got the Roddy emoji. We need to get Roddy back on, don't we? The me walking emoji, my heed, Ralphie's heed, the fantastic 10 out of 10, and the sniper emoji as well. Okay, let's get into this generic before we roll into the quiz at the end, which is going to be an absolute breeze tonight. It's going to be a very easy quiz for the first 5 questions. Pedro Menezes, is he in tonight? Is Pedro in? I'm late, but I'm here. Always nice to catch up, Barflies. Pedro, you're in Glasgow. You're here. And I need to find a way to catch you before you disappear. I've sent you a message on Patreon to say, buddy, where are you going to be tomorrow? What time? And if I can make it, just a handshake, just to meet you while you're here, I'll do it. Pedro, I have had no time this week. It's ridiculous. Corinne has bought me a dram. Corinne, I hope I'm pronouncing your name well, Corinne, but thank you for your recent support as well. Hi, Roy, so glad I joined. What a great community. I just wish I could get all the whiskies you present. I have a little booklet where I write them down. Then I try to order and know. Listen, this is one of the things, Corinne, and we're all going to be challenged, but what you don't need to chase this exact bottle. What you can understand is a wee bit more about single pot still Irish, about American oak versus European oak, or this age against that age, or that distillery against that distillery. It's all kind of almost learning by osmosis. And it's easy to get hung up by what I can buy here and what you can buy where you are. When I was in Texas, so much delicious bourbon, so much delicious American whiskey, so much Scotch whiskey on the shelf that we can't buy here. I can't bring it all home. I need to celebrate and be grateful what I can buy. I feel especially bad for people who are in restricted, choked markets like the Canadian provinces and, Jimmy and various other places around the world that are really kind of cut off. But I also get a wee bit nervous that when they open up, it's going to be much more difficult for us. Celebrate what we can enjoy. I think that's the takeaway from it. But Corinne, thank you very much for your virtual dram, and it's nice to welcome you to this community, and I agree with you. It's fabulous. Cheers. Okay, it's interesting. It is interesting. It's I always say that if there are faults in whiskey, things are the faults, they're marked as faults. And as time goes on, you start to find them as more interesting. There are clear faults in this. There are barriers in the way of pure enjoyment. There are things that hit you to make you stop and pause, and it's not a pleasant pause. But it still remains interesting, and I think that you have to taste it. This is not awful. This is not horrible whiskey, but this isn't right whiskey either. This is a wee bit. This is close to. Somebody mentioned metallic earlier on. There's a metallic note in this. I mean, there's grain, and there's sweetness. It is very interesting. It is quite compelling. I want to go back and taste it again, but it's a wee bit odd. It's a wee bit sour and metallic, a little bit sharp at the edges. Imagine you've bitten into an apple and that you're expecting sweet, but you just get tart. It's like biting into a cooking apple or something. That's the experience. Not because it's all bitter, but just because it's just not ready yet. It's malty. I can taste the spirit. I can taste the malt. I can taste the barley. I can even taste a notion of almost beer, like a hoppy, bitter beer. And I can taste nettles or tea or a green tomato vine, that, a green note. Actually, I think this is a good whiskey to have, a very good whiskey to have. If you're into whiskey and if you're not chasing, the perfect complexity and the perfect balance, the perfect, integrated super, this is a good whiskey to have. And I have to contextualize it and tell you how much it cost me. This was £29. Like I say, I'm convinced this is the type of product that you would normally see for sale in Eastern Europe, but it's making its way back here now because it's not that there's less demand, but there's less ability to get it to where the demand is because of the current situation in Eastern Europe with the war in Ukraine. We're not sending this to Russia. I think that's why we have this. For 29 quid, I would recommend this. Aye, there you go. I would recommend this. But know that it is a flawed whiskey in a very interesting way. And I wish I had the ability to convey that better. But there you go. The Whiskey Franco has also joined. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for your support. The Aquavite Barflies, along with Roy O'Meara. Roy and Franco, thank you very much for your support. It's very much appreciated. Malt Brother Ray saying 2 out of 4 are disappointing. What does this say about single-digit whiskies? Do you know what, Ray? The takeaway is there's an opportunity for this Glen Cooper to be sold to us as a single malt or whatever, single malt Highland, Chininic, whatever, as a non-age statement at £29, and we would buy it and we would appreciate it. There's an option for Glenallachie not to bring out something as a non-age statement to sit under the 12-year-old. There's an option for them not to put an age statement on this, but them to do exactly that, to bring out a non-age statement. There's an option for Deerstalker to continue with their Deerstalker range. Nobody's talking about the Deerstalker range. Hopefully they might now that they're bringing out interesting stuff. And there's an option for Goldspot to bring out Goldspot and not put an age on it. What would we rather have? We can't complain about non-age statement, be transparent, and then be cynical when they come out with a young single-digit age statement on it. We can't. We have to be grateful for what we have, for what we can get. And if they put the age statement on it, even when it's 4 years old, like the Ben Nevis here, like the Murray McDavid Tullibard, and even when it's 4 years old, they're telling us what it is. And in most of these examples I'm sharing with you tonight, I'd say with the exception of the Goldspot, honestly speaking, the prices are in the right place. This £29 5-year-old Chininic, it's in the right place, and it's an interesting whiskey. It's not going to light up anybody's whiskey journey, but it's interesting, and arguably it's something that you probably have to enjoy along the way. And it's not something that I'm glad I don't have to drink. It's something that I'm fortunate to have, maybe. £29, it's not a lot of money. The alternative is non-age statement and a lack of transparency. The alternative is opacity. And I need to have everybody thinking about the way that malt whiskey is being made these days. If we talk about single-digit age statements in 2022, we're talking about whiskey that's been made in the last decade. And that is very, very different how whiskey was made in the 70s and previous. It's very, very different how whiskey was made in the 80s. Everything's different. More whiskey is being made for consumption as a malt. More focus is being put on malt being as good as it can possibly be. More focus than there's ever been in the past, I really believe. Now, I know that things have become much more automated. I know that there's much more computers and touchscreens, valves and pneumatic automation, all of these things over human hands. I know that that's a thing. I know that it's a thing. We can only worry about what we can control. We can control our perspective of the whiskey that's available to us today. And we can look at an on-age statement, we can look at an age statement, and we can look at a mature age statement. I think that we also have to weave into the decision-making process the context of when that whiskey was made and what purpose that whiskey was made for. I think it has a huge impact on our enjoyment. Dribs and Drams is saying, good point, Roy. I'd rather a young age statement to NAS. I like getting the info. It's part of the story of the malt right there on the bottle. What that means, Dribs and Drams, is that if we have an age statement, we know that it's just a pure young whiskey. And if we get a non-age statement, then probably what's happening there is that there's a young whiskey, but with lots of older whiskies in the mix. So there's a much more broad spectrum of vatting going in to make a very specific kind of celebratory release or something trying to be a wee bit different to use an age statement and to, by SWA regulations in the context of Scotch, of course, is to put an age statement on that would be the youngest component, which would betray the value proposition of what they've tried to make there. The trouble is cynicism. Non-age statement today is being used to cover up young whiskey. What we need to do, what that's done is made people nervous about young whiskey. One of the nicest whiskies and more interesting whiskies I've had tonight was Ralphie's 4-year-old heavily peated Ben Nevis. 4 years old. It's like colour. It's okay for the whiskey to be young. It's okay for the whiskey to be pale. What we need is awareness, education, and context, and to consider value more than anything else. That Chininik, that 5-year-old Chininik tonight, despite, I don't remember who it was, I think it was Malt Brother Ray, wasn't it, that said that, I don't consider that a fail tonight. That Chininik, a 5-year-old Chininik, it was £29. I think that's okay. I'm quite happy to have it. The Ben Nevis, fantastic. Not one I would recommend to everyone. Fantastic. Glenallachie, maybe the most interesting Glenallachie I have on my shelf. I would put it alongside the 10-year-old cast strength that I have. That's seriously, at £42, I think it's vibrant and young, a good take. And it's probably got more Billy Walker influence in it by ratio than any other Glenallachie release when you think about it. The Gold Spot tonight, this is, I guarantee you that's going to turn out to be a good whiskey, but I think it's going to struggle to reach £120 worth of whiskey. I'm sorry. It's so much of it, and a lot of people say judge a whiskey based on the whiskey, not on how much the whiskey is, because how much it costs you is different to how much it is me. No, I'll judge a whiskey based on how much it costs me, and I'll tell you how much it costs me, and then you can extrapolate what that means to you. How much money you pay for whiskey is absolutely part of the equation. Absolutely. Our means, how much money we have, how much wealth we have, I'm not going to weave that into the equation at all. I cannot do that. That's too subjective for me. I have less money than a lot and more money than many more. I would say the takeaway from tonight is we can't all try before we buy, of course. Transparency is better than opacity. Age statements need to come back, even if they're single-digit age statements. John, who's a member of the Barflies, has bought me a wee dram as well. In fact, a very generous dram, John, £10. John, the dram that you've just bought me is a third of the bottle of Chininik that I have. Thank you so much, my friend. Slancher to you. No message. Thanks, John. Thank you. And oh no, he's commented, "Hey Aquaviti, I'm 3 years into my whiskey journey and I've recently found your channel. Just wanted to say thanks for cracking content. I'm enjoying and learning so much. Keep up the good work." John, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Listen, if anybody wants to hang around until the quiz at the end, I'm at the 2-hour point. Always worry about these solo efforts. My throat is held up as well. And that I run out of things to talk about. But you know better. There is a quiz at the end. That's a normal quiz at the end, which is always multiple choice. We're going to watch the view numbers drop off. That's okay. That's why the quiz is out at the end. The quiz isn't for everyone. But I think the quiz is one of the most fun ways to learn about stuff and make you pique your curiosity. But it's also a way to kind of tease you and have fun with you. The first 5 questions are relatively easy, and then from then on in, things all wobble a wee bit, and that's certainly, I predict what the map of the quiz is going to be tonight. But listen, before we get into the quiz, if you are going to disappear before you go, what I'm reaching for, what I want to reach for is some of that Glenallachie, but I think I'd finished it. If you are disappearing, I'll say thanks for joining tonight, and I appreciate it. Cheers to you. Thanks for coming along and hanging out with me during my jet lag. Anyway, let's see how we're doing. Quiz at the end. Yes, I have it here. I did remember to prepare it tonight. See if I can add it to the stream so you can see it nice and clearly. Remember, it's always multiple choice. Everybody's got a chance of getting the right answer. There's a 1 in 3 chance every time. The pass mark is usually 5 out of 10. Sometimes I make mistakes on the questions, and if there's any ambiguity, mistake, or controversy about any of the questions that I ask, take the point, book it, give it to yourself, claim it, take it. I hope that I've done well tonight. Captain Bamis is in. Good to see you, buddy. I'm back. You may begin the quiz now. Thank you. And Helen is saying, sort of agree with the cost thing, but now and again a dram comes along that seems pricey for what it is. Drams like Glenturret 12-year-old and Lake's Mosaic are standouts. The Lake's Mosaic I've yet to try, but Erie just put out a review on Dram Face, I think it was today, on Lake's Mosaic that made me super curious. Glenturret 12-year-old, I've talked at length about a £65 12-year-old whiskey that's far too expensive for a 12-year-old, right up until the point that you taste it and realise there's nothing else to compete with it. What we're talking about there, Helen, is comparing one against the other. We're talking about value. It's not about price, it's about value. And you're absolutely spot on that the Glenturret definitely brings that, and I would like to suggest that the Lake's Mosaic has done that for you too, despite, I think it was an £80 price tag. Wow. Tommy Elmer is saying, nah, always round down. Always round down. Just too honest, Tom, just too honest. Okay, good luck, everyone. This is the quiz at the end, and I hope you do very well. The first thing I'm going to do probably is pour another gold spot to give it a second chance. I might do that now, actually. Well, I have you thinking about question 1. Nice and easy to start with. Which of these releases had a single-digit 8-year-old's age statement in the 1980s? Which of these 3 had a 8-year-old age statement in the 80s? A. Talisker, B. Glenfiddich, or C. Arran? Rinse it out with that wee bit of water. Let's go back in and see if this gold spot has got any better. Get the founder's discount, so don't pay full whack for the Lakes Drams. Good for you, Helen. Good for you. That's what you call good planning. Time for a dram quiz. Time for a parachute. Aquaviti, only joking. Play along, Gregor. I hope you're doing well, buddy. It was fantastic to hang out. Gregor joined me for the weekend in Texas, and there was a thing that he made me laugh so much about that if I even think about it now, I thank you, Gregor, for your company. You're tremendous, my friend. It's wonderful to have had you there. Everybody seemed to be thinking. Top Shelf Dustin is saying, sorry, answered before the choices. Hey, Dustin, you can be forgiven. You can be forgiven. But you're absolutely spot on. Talisker is the right answer. There was an 8-year-old Talisker. Look at this bottle here. How things have changed on the label. A green bottle back then, clear bottle now. Talisker 8-year-old. Interestingly, one of my favourite Taliskers ever is an 8-year-old Talisker, but it's not that one you see there. If I wanted to try this, or if you wanted to try this now, you would be paying about 800, 1,000, 1,200 pounds or more. The wee whiskey would struggle to keep up with that, I think. I think you'd be going for history. Absolutely, A. Question 2, which of these Islay distilleries has not, in recent times, had an 8-year-old official release? Has not had an 8-year-old official release. A. Bruichladdich, B. Bunnahabhain, or C. Ardbeg. Which of these has not had an official release? This smells like bourbon. My goodness. What am I missing? Where's my... Is it because I've just come back? Is it... It's so bourbony on the nose. So much new oak. Bruichladdich didn't have an 8-year-old. Bunnahabhain didn't have an 8-year-old. Ardbeg did not have an 8-year-old official release. You guys have got it. It's absolutely easy. First 5 questions tend to be a little lighter. Bunnahabhain. Ardbeg had recently just had an 8-year-old for discussion. I very much enjoyed. I actually think, as I look over there, it's not on the shelf. I think I may have loaned it out. Ardbeg 8-year-old for discussion was an official release, still available. £57 at the distillery. Don't pay any more, please. Some idiots are trying to charge a hell of a lot more for that, not realising it's still fully available. And of course, Bruichladdich had Adam Hannett's the Bruichladdich 8. B was the right answer. Question 3, which of these launched a single-digit age statement, an 8-year-old, in 2015? Which of these launched an 8-year-old age statement in 2015? Was it A. Glendronach, B. Glencadam, or C. Glengoyne? Molasses is saying, my neighbour just had a big white oak felled. All I could think of all day was bourbon from the fresh oak smell. It's incredible, but you don't appreciate that's the smell that you're getting in the whiskey until you... And it's just wisps of it. It's just wisps of a kind of almost maple syrup, syrupy, black tea, bizarre sweetness. It's difficult to articulate until it's been cut. Tommy Elmer is saying you loan out bottles. How does that go for you? Yes, the Ardbeg 8-year-old, I'm pretty sure it's in the same place as my Redbreast 12 cast strength, an SMWS or two. I can't even remember what I loaned out. Hey, it's not whiskey until it's shared, Tom. And the more you pay it forward, the more you get paid back, is what I'm discovering. Absolutely, you're all spot on. With this one again, very few of you have gone anywhere other than A for Glendronach. Of course, I'm talking about the release of the Healing that was mentioned earlier in the stream, as was the Talisker 8-year-old as well. And I think even the Bruichladdich 8, all of them were 8-year-olds, all of them were mentioned. But I think now the Glendronach 8-year-old, the Healing, has unfortunately been discontinued. If I look at the Brown-Forman Glendronach website, that would be a shame. Papa Q is in on 3 out of 3, along with Glenn Anderson, Philip Wagner, Philip Eagleton, Bruno Martins, Nicholas, Malt Brother Ray, Peter Box, Molasses Mike, Marty Wong, lots and lots of them on 3 out of 3. Marty's saying it's a miracle. Question 4. In 2015, what whiskey event happened in Dublin? We start to get a bit trickier now. Excuse me. In 2015, what whiskey event happened in Dublin? Was it A, the last distillery was closed and relocated? B, the Spot series was relaunched? Or C, the first new distillery in 125 years opened? One of these 3 things happened specifically in 2015. Erwin is saying I should have went with the crowd. He went against the crowd and he's now in 2 out of 3. Erwin, look out for the banana skin. That's when you can make those calls to go against the crowd a wee bit. There was no banana skin on that one. Look out for it a wee bit later. This is splitting the crowd a little bit, with the vast majority suggesting the first new distillery was opened. But some of you are thinking the Spot series was relaunched, and maybe even one of you at least thinking the last distillery was closed and moved. No, it was indeed the first new distillery in 125 years opened. Spot series never truly died out. It almost did. It was brought back from the brink. It's a bit of a phoenix, the Spot series. But the first new distillery in 125 years was opened by the Teelings after they sold Kilbeggan and Cooley Distillery. They were able to open in Dublin in 2015. Plans were afoot way before that. 2015 is when they actually finally opened. Question 5, talking about new distilleries. What we're seeing is a distillery in construction, which is a tricky one, right? We are seeing it mid-construction. We're not seeing the finished thing, but we are seeing a very historic chimney stack being utilised here. Now, I don't think they're going to use this chimney stack. Of course, it's there just for aesthetics. Are we looking at A, Port Ellen, B, Brora, C, Rosebank? Which new distillery are we looking at? Of course, I've not seen them in tonight, but this photograph, like so many of the photographs I've been using on the vPub, is courtesy of Graham Fraser. If you're interested in more of Graham Fraser's photography work, watch the BBC Weather. And if it comes from Graham, Weather Graham, chances are it's from our Graham Fraser. So many of you are going to be celebrating a 5 out of 5 for the quiz at the end tonight. Absolutely spot on if you answered C for Rosebank. I think that picture was taken a few weeks ago. It's really quite stunning now. There's lots of glass frontage here. This is much more impressive than I expected this distillery to actually look when it was finished. When I was looking at the artwork beforehand, I thought it was always almost like a concept car thing. There's no way they're going to be able to deliver it. But it's starting to look quite stunning. A modern take on an old distillery where lots of the original imagery of it was lost. Question 6. Dramface question here. If you were fortunate to snag a bottle of Bowmore Tempest in the United States, what would it actually be called? So Tempest was globally released as Tempest, but in the US, it was called something else. And if you're a reader of Dramface, you'd know this, no problem. But for the rest of you, you might need to use your knowledge or your guesswork. A, Bowmore Jochen-Doris. B, Bowmore Doris Cool. C, Bowmore Doris Moore. Jochen-Doris, Doris Cool, or Doris Moore? If you bought a bottle of Tempest 10-year-old, I wish I had a bottle of it. It's very tasty Bowmore to my palate. But you were in the US, what would it be called? Jochen-Doris, Doris Cool, or Doris Moore? And I think this is a legal thing. I think somebody else has got a Tempest whiskey or something. I don't know how it works. So many whiskies have got to be renamed by the time they get to the States because of that. I guess context doesn't mean a lot in the legal framework of things. Graham Fraser is in tonight. Hello, buddy. How you doing? He's gone C, gone with the crowd. Graham, you don't read Dramface. I'm trying to. I would wish you would write for Dramface. Jimmy Legg is saying it was Tempest in Canada. Aye, I think I didn't say North America. Definitely US, buddy. I think probably you would get the 700ml UK stock. C, you're absolutely right. Doris Moore. Fantastic wee write-up. A whiskey that I was a wee bit sad that I missed because I did get to try it. And it was a good one, really fruity style of Bowmore, ex-bourbon cask that we all enjoy. And Tom Elmer is saying it's just a Tempest in a bottle. Terrific, Tom. Question 7. Which of these world whiskies enjoyed a nomination during the inaugural Oswas? The reason I've put this question in is I want to remind everybody that on the 23rd, Ralphie and I will be getting together here to talk about the nominations for the 2022. They are currently being curated in the background. All the channels. We're now approaching 60 different contributors for this year's Oswas. We're not messing around. We've gone from 24 to almost 60 in 1 year. We're opening it right up beyond YouTube. Everybody's involved now. They're all voting in the background. In the next few days, that'll be locked down and we will have curated our top 6 for each category, and that will go out on a live stream from here on the vPub on the Friday the 23rd, which is just over a week from today. Ralphie will be with me, all things going to plan, and I look forward to welcoming you there. That's why I've put it in to remind you about that. But I'm asking you, cast your mind back. What world whiskey enjoyed a nomination during last year's Oz was? Was it A, Redbreast 12-year-old, B, Bain's Cape Mountain single grain, or C, Elijah Craig small batch? Redbreast 12, Bain's Cape Mountain grain, Elijah Craig small batch. Chris Witham is in. Good to see you, Chris. I hope you're doing well. Helen is saying, I hope we have a signal to tune in. Okay, you'll be in Isla, won't you, next week, Helen? Be amazing if you and I were able to meet as you passed through as well. Oh my goodness. It does start to get tricky on the second half because this is splitting the crowd. I can tell you there is a wee banana skin there, and the reason that the banana skin's there is that there were redbreasts in the inaugural Oz was. However, it was the 15 and the 21-year-old and also the 12-year-old cast strength. The 12-year-old standard did not get nominated. Elijah Craig small batch was in the nominations, but not in the shape of the small batch. Elijah Craig was in there in the barrel proof. However, Bain's Cape Mountain single grain did get a nomination. B is the one you were looking for. Apologies for the banana skin there. I know that it's a year ago. Your memory's not. It was a wee bit tricky, and the wheels might start to fall off a wee bit now. Peter Lee is saying Helen's Wood is with me for Whiskey Monday. Terrific, Peter. You're a superstar. Such a welcoming guy. So cool to see. Question 8. How many of the original classic malts of 1988 still carry the same age statement today? The original classic malts of 1988. Let's see if I can remember. This was made up of Glenkinchie, Talisker, Lagavulin, Dalwhinnie, Oban, and I'm always going to forget one. One of them. One of those. Two of those. Or none of those. A, all of them. B, all but one. Or C, all but two. Which of the original classic malts of 1988 still carry the same age statement as today? A, all. B, all but one. C, all but two. Cragganmore, thank you. Thank you, Andrew Pears. Thank you, Bruno Martins. Absolutely, Cragganmore. Helen, despite the bananas that she's mentioning, is still on a 7 out of 7. Fantastic, along with Sid Martin. Sid, so good to see you, buddy. I hope you're well. Chris Witham is celebrating a 7 out of 7 as well. Superb. Chris. Gabriel Welding, 2. Andrew Butler, of course. Andrew, you star. Don McCausland, Philip Wagner, Glenn Anderson, Pedro Menezes, Molasses Mike, Philip Eagleton, and Steve Atkis, amongst others. Mark Umaikinen are on 6. Still good scores. This was all but one. The original 6 classic malts, out of them all, they've all maintained the same age statement until today, which is quite amazing when you think about it. 30 odd years. Have a wee look at this picture. The one on the left-hand side originally launched as a 10-year-old, but today we pick up Glenkinchie as a 12-year-old. It's the only one to change its age statement. Lagavulin, 16, Oban, 14, Cragganmore, 12, Talisker, 10, Dalwhinnie, 15. Question 9, second from last. Which distillery came before the town it is located in? A, Pulteney. B, Oban. C, Bamore. Which distillery came before the town it was located in? Tricky question. Penultimate question. Ander Garcia is celebrating. Never had 7 out of 8. Keep it together, Ander. Keep it together. Helen's Wood is on 8 out of 8. She's scraping through along with Andrew Butler. This is just tremendous to see. You guys are amazing. This one is dividing the community a wee bit. This one is going to take a lot of scalps, I think. I'm looking for Andrew Butler. Nope. I don't see Andrew. Karina's going for B. Hellswood is going for B. Both going for Oban, and I can tell you that you're absolutely right. Pulteney was built on the back of the herring trade, so there was already a population in a town in place. So that was put in place specifically to cater for that. And what was the other one? Bamor, of course, Bamor, the capital of Islay, a long ancient settlement in Bamor. So that was very much put there after the town. It might not have been called a town when the distillery first started to get built, but it certainly wasn't the thing that preceded. But in the case of Oban, so much so that the town was built right around the distillery, and it's probably one of the very few distilleries on the planet that physically cannot expand. That is absolutely constricted and limited. Oban, owned by Diageo, West Coast of Scotland, that was in existence before the town itself. Okay, let's see, before we hit the asshat at the end, who's on a 9 out of 9 tonight, who's almost there. Lots and lots of 7s and 8s. Look at that. High scores. Molasses is saying damn. Andrew Pearce on 7, Robert J on 7, Too Slow on 7, Philip Wagner 7, BMO 7, Philip Eagleton 7, Mark Umiken, and lots of 7s. But Andrew Butler is on a 9. Hellswood is on a 9. Fantastic. It's often the same names, isn't it? It's often the students, the scholars. Yeah, Molasses Mike is saying easy quiz my arse. And Bruno is saying a lovely town open. I agree. They managed to fix my phone famously in 2019 after I dropped it off the roof of my car at speed. Okay, good. Let's go into the asshat at the end. It is an asshat tonight. Of course it is. It is not going to be easy. It's deliberately meant to be awkward. Dramface. Any of you that likes reading about whiskey and whiskey opinion, there's 20 plus writers contributing to that site now. It's quite amazing. Dramface.com, daily content going out. But Dramface recently celebrated its first 6 months. Until now, how many whiskies have been reviewed and scored? About the same number as A, litres in a hogshead. B, pounds required to buy a bottle of Lagavulin 12-year-old. The annual special release I'm talking about. C, all the malt distilleries currently producing in the British Isles combined. So Dramface celebrated his first 6 months. We published a page and did a wee kind of minor infographic type celebration there. You can go onto dramface.com, click on more, first 6 months, and you can see all the stats and things, how many was Scotch, how many was indie, how many was official, all of the things if you want to look under the hood. But specifically I'm focusing on here is how many whiskies were reviewed and scored as of now. So you would have to know that 6 month point and then kind of extrapolate a little bit over the last couple of weeks. Is it A, the amount of litres we have in a hogshead? B, the amount of pounds required to buy a Lagavulin 12-year-old in today's money for today's purchase for the 2021 release? Or C, all the malt distilleries currently producing in the British Isles combined? It is an asshat, absolutely. It is A. Around 250 whiskies have been reviewed and scored on Dramface, which is about the same as the amount of litres in a hoggy. Pounds required to buy Lagavulin 12 is currently about £130 at retail, and all the malt distilleries currently producing in the British Isles combined. That's really tricky to tie down because of the different stages that they're at, but it's somewhere in the neighbourhood of about 200 British Isles distilleries. Did any of you manage to scrape your way through to a 10? Dope, says Dave Cummins. Dave, we managed to hang out. It was amazing. I stink at these quizzes, he's saying. Good for you to be hanging out to the end, my friend. Thank you so much. Dominic Osland is saying, wow, that's so many reviews. I'm way behind on my reading, 7 out of 10. You don't need to keep up and read up. It's a dip in and dip out. Pick the reviews that you're interested in. Sometimes it's nice to dip in on a whiskey that you've never heard of and you think that you're never going to be able to buy, but the backstory, the context, or the reason it came into existence, so many personal wee anecdotes weave into those write-ups. It's my daily read now. I still read Malt Review. I still read Words of Whiskey by Tees. I think I'm pronouncing your name well, Tees Klaverstein, I think his name is. Fantastic independent sites. I still read The Dramble. I read Menno's Multi-Mission. I read all of these independent sites. But Dramface has become just such a wee guilty pleasure for me. I absolutely love it. Emil is in. Emil, we got to hang out. We flew back together. Very, very separate seats, my friend. But he's saying good quiz. Emil, it's wonderful to welcome you in here. I wonder how you scored. Did anybody manage a 10? Molasses is saying 10 out of 10 on the bad score scale. Let's see if Helen managed to scrape past it. No. So close. She's saying 9 out of 10. And Andrew Butler, I'm still not picking up any comments from Andrew. He might have... maybe no 10 out of... Did I catch everyone tonight? If you're watching on the replay and you did manage a 10 out of 10, please make a big noise about it in the comments underneath. I do think that it was an easy first half tonight and a very, very tricky second half. So thank you all for doing your very, very best and being reasonable about it. Mike Molasses is saying Dramface is such a treat. Thank you, Mike. Black Fen is in. Good to see you, Black Fen. Wonderful to have you, buddy. Emil got an 8 out of 10. Good for you. Fantastic, Emil. Gino Kumo is saying, thanks for a great evening, Roy, and have a great weekend, sir. Gino, you too, my friend, and thank you for hosting our legend, Jimmy Legg, earlier today. Andrew Butler, only a 9 out of 10, Andrew. It's fantastic. It looks like the 10 out of 10 has eluded everyone tonight, even the legends like Helen and Andy, Andrew Butler, and the folk that usually manage to take away the 10 out of 10s. I hope it's still been fun. I hope you still enjoyed it. It was fun for me, despite my jet lag, despite me being out of it all week, despite my slightly hoarse throat, and despite me having to fight my way through all these terrible, really difficult to enjoy single-age statement whiskies. It's been amazing. It always is amazing. I really look forward to this thing. And it doesn't matter the challenges that we face, whether it's availability in our area, whether it's non-age statements or single-digit age statements, or whether it's expensive age-stated products. All of these things, we work together as a community and we learn just how to continue to enjoy this marvelous thing that is only produced for no other reason than to connect with all our primary senses and make us know what it is to be alive. And what a privilege it is. Sometimes it pays dividends to focus on the positive rather than the negative of things, right? Appreciate all of you. I really do. And I appreciate my Thursday nights. I'll be back here next week for another completely fresh topic. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. In the meantime, I'll raise this glass to you all. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for everything. Thank you for all your support. I'll tell you that you're very dearly loved, and I look forward to hanging out with you next week. Until then, Slàinte mhath.